I remember one time I had somebody on the podcast and they had said something along the lines of like, yeah, I said some stuff on here that I probably shouldn't have said. To me, that's a high compliment. It means that I like managed to pull something out of them. Sure,
yeah, at least they were present and in the moment. And, you know, there's something to be said for that, I think, honestly.
Yeah, and I think that like, I think conversations are how we learn about ourselves. I think talking is how we learn about ourselves. Like, I don't think you would know yourself if you just thought all day. I think you actually have to express your ideas. It's like why writing is good. Totally. I think that, and then, you know, you need a conversational partner that's willing to engage with you. I mean, I heard a quote once that's like, the best conversations are one where we're both oriented towards the truth. And I think that's really interesting. It's like we're both trying to get somewhere, but we don't exactly know where we're going or what we're doing. That's, I think, where the best stuff happens. Because now it's like, I'm kind of exploring this idea and you're kind of exploring this idea. And we're both just throwing darts at the wall and seeing if anything sticks. And I think it's interesting talking to comedians because I think comics have that in them already. I think they have this thing where they want to explore. Like they want to find the root of an idea and, oh, what is funny about this? Or what is interesting about this? And the idea is not just an idea. It's like a point to jump off from, to go somewhere with, like a bit. And so to me, like that's just the most interesting thing to me is when, can you pop that door open? She wants back out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me out of here.
Let me escape. The show has started. But yeah, no, I just think that, I think everything can be deeper than it is presented as if you allow it to be. And I think interviewing and podcasts are definitely that. And it's almost a shame to me when that is squandered. Like, and I just learned that in myself at one point where it's like, oh, I must just have like this therapeutic thing in me that makes people comfortable because they'll tell me their darkest secrets.
Sure, yeah.
and I guess that's good.
Yeah, definitely. It doesn't hurt. I mean, well, what comes to mind with what you were saying is, you know, there's a Herman Melville quote that I like a lot that goes, it's not on any map. The best places never are. And I do feel like that's kind of bound up with what you're saying and what we were saying, I think, even before we started, just this idea of, to me, like when you're talking and expressing yourself and where you go, like you are kind of, the unconscious bubbles up a lot, I think, in that space and like things we don't expect. It's kind of like what you were saying as well, as far as like, when you go into a show or you're going to go on stage and you have a preconceived notion. I mean, I think there can be a lot of value to that. Obviously, preparation exists for a reason, and the underprepared often reap what they sow. But on the other hand, sometimes if you're like too set in your way or sort of locked in, or you have a preconceived notion or mindset, you know, sometimes that like kind of tanks rising to the moment of what's needed.
I think more often than not.
Yeah, and you can see that sometimes too, I think, with certain audiences. Like something I've been trying to pay more attention to is this idea of, and you know, sometimes you need to go in the opposite direction of what I'm about to say, but like, what does the audience want or what do they need? You know, like I've heard, again, we were talking about like certain phrases or things like that, terminology. I mean, something that's come up for me more recently that I try to pay attention to is this idea of like, they don't want material. You know, and it's like to understand that notion of like, does an audience want like your prepared
what does that
work?
mean? Yeah.
It's like, do they want like workshop ideas and like tried and true things? You know, are they here to like hear stand-up comedy, or do they want you to be more in the moment and a little bit more present, commenting on what's going on? You know, for some people it's as simple as just riffing, but I do think that it's more, again, like, to me, it's as much about like what do they want as also like what are you allowing yourself to do, right? Are you, when you say, like I was on stage the other night, and I have a joke that I always do that usually doesn't get a response, and so kind of as a way of kind of like pepping that up, I'll comment on it, and then I'll have a follow-up line, and then I'll go, contain your surprise. And the point is that the audience, it is like a little surprising, but that normally the audience doesn't respond to it, right? And that's fine. In the moment, and that I've done this joke many times, somebody was like, really? And I go, contain your surprise. Well, some of us can't, and that's not like that's some sort of, that's such an amazing moment, but that is also allowing yourself to react to what's going on, right? And sometimes I think if you're like really have a preconceived notion, or like you're on rails with what you think is gonna, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I mean, you got to do all that preparation so that you can let go a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like a gift and a curse, because I've learned even if I prepare, I tend to just not, like there's been a couple times where I'll have people that I'm going to talk to, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is somebody maybe I should like actually write down questions for and come up with stuff for. And then once I'm in the moment, I'm like, oh, well, I don't need these questions. Like I end up asking like 3 of them.
Sure.
And it's just because I think that there's something like the free-flowing momentum that you'll find if you're doing that, if you're existing in that moment and not being so preconceived, it tends to be more magical, for lack of a better word. And I think like with a show, like a comedy show, what you'll see happen is, I think the stuff that people remember or the stuff that sticks with people tends to be that kind of stuff where it's like, oh, that moment when he interacted with that audience member, that was entirely unique.
Yeah.
And they know it's unique, because how wouldn't it be? Like you couldn't have planned that. There's no way to plan that. And I think that stuff's the most special, because it makes people feel like it's for them.
Sure.
It's like, this was just for us. Like this wasn't. And also I think like what happens is, and this is kind of how I figured it out in me, is I started doing an interview show called 60 Seconds With. And so what the whole idea was, I show up and I do a full interview, and then I edit it down to a 60-second video. And it always ends up being super concise, super tight. And it's kind of like a representation of who that person is. But the only way that works is if you get them to be themselves. And the only way you can get them to be themselves is by being yourself, by showing up and just kind of talking with them in a way. Like, say I'm interviewing you and it's a formal interview. What if you have an answer and that interests me? I'm willing to even put the camera down and say, and like talk with you for a second. Like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's cool because of this and this and this. And like that will completely shift the energy, because, a lot of the time people are nervous. People don't know what they're going to do. People are going into things thinking, oh, I don't know. Like an interview especially. Oh, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to sound like an idiot. I don't even know what we're going to talk about, this and that. And so it's up to you as the person that's guiding the experience to be cool and to guide it in a way that's open and isn't so tight. Because say I show up with like a suit on and I'm all formal and I'm just like looking at my notes the whole time. Well, now they're really nervous.
Oh yeah.
Like now they're like, oh, I better not fuck this up. And that's so different than showing up casual and just making it feel like you're hanging out with them. And again, I just do that anyway. So I was trying to figure out, like, why does this work? Like, what is it about this? And then I think when you look at, like, the best interviewers, that tends to be the case. Like, they're prepared, but they also know how to flow with things and go with the moment. Like, people that come to my mind are, I think, Nardwuar.
Yeah, Nardwuar. I was thinking about him earlier. Yeah, iconic.
And he's super, super duper prepared. I mean, the most prepared.
I mean, I don't think they get more prepared than that.
He's literally a spy.
Yeah. But then they also have moments at the end, right? When he does the freeze pose, where you never know what you're going to get with that. He doesn't presumably know how they're going to respond, and so I feel like there is some like improv baked in as well that makes it fresh and different, and kind of putting those people in scenarios where you don't know what response you're going to get, because it's like when he shows you an EP that you released when you were in 6th grade and you only made 3 cassettes of it and he somehow has one. I mean, we can all imagine that you're going to be like, that's crazy that you have that. But I do love, that, I love that ending portion that he always does. I remember I tweeted at Nardwuar back in the day, like this was like probably like 15 years ago, and I was like, whenever I get to the end of the call, sometimes I'll just do the Nardwuar face and wait to see how long it takes the other person to hang up. And he retweeted that. And I remember his response, because this is how he'd respond to all the people that tweeted to him, was just like, doot.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he's iconic interviewer, I think, and really also handling like some of those early ones. Like I think it's like his interview with Blur. Yeah, there's 90s interviews where the people he was interviewing just bully him.
Yeah.
And he has to kind of like work his way through that. So he's come a long way, man. I mean, not to sort of nard out right now, but I mean, he also had a stroke like 5 years ago.
I didn't know that.
And is still doing interviews now. So yeah, shouts out Nardwuar.
And shouts out you for watching this show. We love you. We appreciate you. And you must love and appreciate us just a little bit if you've stuck around this long. So thank you so much. And if you want to show that love, you want to make that love a big old bubble and blow it up, well, then what you got to do is join the Patreon. $5 a month, and you make this show grow. You make it bigger and better than ever, and you get access to exclusive Patreon content. That's right. Exclusive podcast stuff, me talking to people in a place you're never going to see anywhere else. It's only there just for you. I've got music that's only there just for you. And also, like I said, you just get the pleasure of knowing that you are supporting the rooster himself, the ruse, the man, and you are my chickens, you are my roosters, and you are welcome in the Coop Troop anytime. Let's get back to Nardwuar. There was a Nardwuar interview, I can't remember who it was, but they gave him a gift, and it was like a picture of his mom who had passed away.
Wow.
And he, like, it was the sweetest Nardwuar moment I've ever seen, because they out Nardwuar'd Nardwuar. Like, they got
that's
him.
Impressive. That's
I've
impressive.
never seen anybody get Nardwuar like that. And the other thing I would say is, like, what's always fun about him too is when you can tell that somebody is a fan of his and they get it, because then they play into it and they play into the energy he's bringing and all of that. And that's, to him, that must be so gratifying, right? Because he's never changed. He's always been the same exact guy. So to have somebody come back and, hey,
yeah, I love. Well, you're ruse. We have to know.
we have to know.
Yeah, that's just the sort of recurring little intricacies of them are they're very compelling.
Yeah.
I think.
The other one I would say is Sean Evans. I think Sean Evans from Hot Ones.
Yeah.
I mean, what he's doing is essentially a very gimmicky interview, but his interviewing skills are so good.
I think so,
that
too.
it breaks through that mold and he gets people to open up. And like it's a very interesting thing to watch, because you'll see people come in and they don't really know what they're getting into. They think it's just a hot wing show, and then he starts asking questions and they realize how much he actually knows about them.
Yeah. I like his energy a lot too, in terms of like one of the things, because I agree with you. Like in some ways, and I've watched plenty of Hot Ones, and it's like in some ways, like it can be a very basic format, you know, like with their sort of, let's do an Instagram deep dive, you know, like, but I think to your point, what really works with him is he, to me, whenever he's kind of like getting into somebody's background and he's like, ruse, when you were doing the Zany's diss track, he always has like this excitement about kind of uncovering the story of the person.
Well, I heard him once say he was on H3, the H3 podcast, which he hasn't done very many interviews himself.
Yeah. Which is also helpful. I think you got to maintain the mystique a little bit.
He's on the Ruse Radio list.
Yeah.
We gotta get
let's
Sean
make it
Evans.
happen,
dude. I want him so bad. But he romantically too, by the way.
Nice.
But he H3. I don't even know if he was asked, but he was just sharing. And he said that, like, one of the ways he comes up with questions is he'll watch interviews that the people have done. And he looks for, like, the moment when they were talking about something and then the interviewer kind of changes the subject or moves on. But you could tell in their face they wanted to talk more about it. And that's, like, so genius to me. Because he's looking for, like, the in-between stuff. Like, he's looking for the part where, oh, they were excited about that and they wanted to talk about that. Like, that's something that they like, that's a part of them they want to share. And that's a very wise way to conduct an interview, like to pay attention to what makes them tick, because the basic way is to look at a biography and just read all the stuff that they've done and say like, okay, so they've done this, so I'll ask them this. It's like he's actually trying to pull something out of them that they feel, like and that lights people up. It really does. Like people recognize when you recognize them. It makes such a difference.
I agree. I also think like one of the things that's, maybe a little bit of inside baseball, but is harder for a lot of people to comprehend is that, I mean, for most celebrities, I mean, they do press junkets and things of that nature. So, I mean, and I think like certain videos, like I'm thinking of like there's a Jesse Eisenberg video where he's like being very combative with the interviewer. And like I think part of the backstory of that, is that these celebrities, when they're on a press tour, do 1 million interviews, right? And many of them are asking the same questions. Yeah. You're telling the same story about whatever Marvel movie you were just in or what have you. And so, finding trying to create a space, I mean, the length of the interviews helps a lot, right? And also I think ostensibly when you're eating the hot wings, you're kind of in a vulnerable state in a way. Yeah. You're just praying for the glass of milk. But I think that is something, to your point of like trying to really figure out like what is an untapped vein for this person, because the reality is like way more so than like what most of us can comprehend if we're interviewed for something. These people have been interviewed a lot. Yeah. And they've trod over the same well-known material quite a bit. So trying to really, trying to find like a fresh stone to turn over, I think does go a long way in an industry where you're, interacting with people who just have been talked to a lot, frankly.
Yeah. There's a guy I know, he puts together wrestling shows, and their next one is in February. It's called Bloodstone Wrestling, and I'm trying to get him on the show. And he told me, like, yeah, come to the show, you can interview the wrestlers, all this. And his tip to me was, don't ask them about wrestling. That's all they get asked about. And that's just great advice, because it's like your first instinct is to walk up to them and say, like, oh, how long have you been wrestling for? Mm-hmm. What's your favorite match? What do you, what's your favorite promo you've ever cut? All these wrestling questions, but really what they want to get asked is like, what do you like to do when you step outside of the ring? Like or even you can ask about wrestling, but don't ask the basic stuff. Ask like, what wrestlers inspired you to get into the business? When you first started wrestling, what was it that really drove you to do it? Like, what is it about the industry itself that makes you want to do this? And what keeps you wrestling? And stuff like that. That's so much more interesting than just asking them like, oh, what's your favorite move? Because they've heard that type of thing 1 million times. Yeah,
it's tricky. I mean, one thing that I learned, and I've done some interviewing over the years. I mean, part of my background is in film, so I've done documentary filmmaking and had to interview people for that. And one of the things I learned also just through time spent with like artists of different stripes is, I mean, like with musicians, for example. I mean, I'm talking to one. Yeah. But it's like sometimes I feel like who's your favorite artist or things like that. Man, I've seen musicians like shut down when you ask them that question. I'm not kidding.
Really?
I've seen, and filmmakers too, because that was really, that's what I was studying for a long time. And, I mean, I've interacted with, filmmakers where I've asked them, who's your favorite filmmaker, or like, what's the last great film that you watched, which I feel like are kind of like two pillars of the type of question you're describing. Yeah. And sometimes people really, they're over it. You know what I mean? But I've also found, a great example of this is, I mean, a filmmaker that I respect a lot. I remember asking him about his inspirations, and he was like, to be honest, most of my inspirations aren't related to film. They're like, they're painting or architecture or things of that nature, which I feel like kind of supports what you're saying, which is like that you kind of have to find a different way in sometimes, I think. I mean, it all depends on the person. Some people love to. I see an MF Doom record down there. That
was a gift from comedian Milo Mack.
Oh man, Milo Mack. Well, I was really repping New York with that one. That's cool. I like that. This is a great album. I listen to Doomsday, all right? The one with the Sade Kiss of Life sample in it. Yeah. Like daily at this point.
MF Doom is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best, iconic for sure. But I think, sometimes finding a different way into people, especially because it's like, some people...
Finding your own way in.
Some people just don't want to, they're asked about the most basic elements of their art form all day, every day, or whatever their version of that is, and it's all about the vibe of the person too. Some people you can tell just will gab it up regardless, but I found a lot of the people that frankly that I respect, or where it's like their work, maybe they're not the type of person we were talking about before we started recording, where it's like, you know, a chatterbox, or they don't want to open up all the time. To get to those people, sometimes you need a different route, because it's like they don't want to deal with the basics. You know, so I think, you know, you gotta read the room on that one a little bit too.
In what context were you doing interviews? Like, what was this for?
I mean, I've done a lot, just in my own way. I've done a lot of interviews over the years, but so I mean, one of the big ones was I was always related to like multimedia projects when I was going through school and stuff like that. So I conducted a bunch of interviews for the Kurt Vonnegut Memorial Library.
Okay.
Because I was living in Indianapolis, and which is where Vonnegut is from, and so it was for the Memorial Library, which was kind of this foundation that was established after his passing, that was kind of preserving his memory in Indianapolis. And so I interviewed a bunch of people that like knew him and kind of worked with him for the library to do basically like archival recordings. And so this included interviewing people who knew him in Indy, but then eventually I went to New York for a little bit, and, you know, was interviewing like his agent. I interviewed Lewis Black, who was part of the foundation at the time. So that was pretty interesting to be. I'm like a young college student, and I'm interviewing Lewis Black, and he's like, yeah, we only have this much time because I need to go get this root canal or whatever, you know. So, which was cool. I mean, he was dope, you know. Like, for those, you know, who like Vonnegut, Cat's Cradle is his favorite Vonnegut book, if people like that type of lore.
Fun fact.
But yeah, I mean, it's fun. I only know that because I was there. But yeah, I just remember like being there with Lewis Black in New York. I'm wearing a suit. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to project professionalism because I've flown out to New York to interview this guy. And so, you know, things like that, I do think kind of informed this notion of like, what questions are you asking? And if I've only got this time with this guy, like, what's going to make it worth our while? Like, what are we, you know, you don't want to go too basic. You don't want to go too esoteric either, but how do you find the sweet spot? So I did some interviewing at that point, and then I went to UT Austin for my graduate degree in film. And part of the reason I went to UT is because you could make documentary or narrative films. Okay. So I was able to do both. And so I did some documentary filmmaking while I was there, which included some interviewing, some man on the street type stuff. I produced a documentary and directed it that was about electric scooter charging. Ooh. Right when those came to Austin, and right when those were kind of popular. So this was in 2018. And so Austin was basically filled.
Austin, the most bikeable city ever.
Yeah. Well, you know, and then when you don't have one, I mean, it was great for the college students, right? They used to talk about this. There's this concept in, I guess, urban planning called the last mile. Okay. And the last mile refers to this idea of like when you have 1 mile left between you and your location. So if you're, you know, living off campus, but you need to get, you know, to class, then the scooters were going ham. But this was also in an era where there were more scooters in the city than there were supposed to be, because they had brought in they weren't being licensed properly. So they were the companies were bringing in more scooters than they were technically allowed to. And then also for the electric scooter charger. So that's what I did. I profiled one of Austin's probably like top 5 most competitive electric scooter chargers. Whoa. Yeah, and so he would get like 40 to 50 a night, and he would charge them and he would repair them as well. But the great part about this was,
what the fuck? What a weird job.
Yeah. That was, you know, we were like freaking the gig economy at that point. But basically, this guy, you weren't required to wear any high visibility safety material at that point. And that changed the year after I made this. And so at this point, he's running around in like shorts and a tank top, you know? But about, you know, 4 months later, everybody that was doing that job had to be high vis. But anyway, so, you know, I was like following that guy for a while, and I was talking to people about the scooters and talking to people on the street about that kind of stuff. So, I've spent some time, you know, asking people questions, basically. But I to me, and this was kind of to your point about the nature of interviewing and stuff like that, is in documentary, there are, and these are people who are real doc heads, you know, like who are, that's like their thing.
Not to be confused with dickheads.
No, very different, much, you know, equally pleasurable, but in a different way.
Equally inquisitive too.
Yeah, you gotta be you gotta really get under the skin in more ways than one. But these folks where documentary is their thing, there's so much philosophy to documentary, and it's a very compelling part of doing it, because there are people who are like, I would never ask you a question without having the camera on. And because I don't know how you're going to respond. I don't know what you're going to do. You could have an epiphany.
Right.
And because I didn't want to be too vulnerable, or I didn't, I wanted to prepare you properly, we're never going to get that moment. And then you have other people that are like, I would never do that, because if we're making this documentary together, I'm like your caretaker and your shepherd, and I'm the one who's asking you to do this and putting the camera on you and kind of prompting you to tell your story. So if we're going to do that, I need you to feel safe and comfortable and build the relationship. Ultimately, I mean, it is a philosophical or like ethical thing. There's a lot of ethics in documentary, but I also think that it kind of depends on the story you're trying to tell, right? I think there are stories where maybe you're going deeper into a past event or something like that, something that happened that the person is unpacking themselves or they're trying to get closure on. In those sort of things, it's more like the philosophy of like the intimacy coordinator in a narrative film, I think, where it's like you want to like have gone through the steps to like make sure that the person is prepared. In other stories, I think it's just more about like, can we even put a camera there? Could we even get the camera in that moment? And sometimes you don't have like the luxury of that. A great example of this I think of is Werner Herzog and his movie Grizzly Man.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's. I think you'd really like it for what it's worth. Grizzly Man is the story of Timothy Treadwell, and Timothy Treadwell was this guy. He appeared on like Letterman and stuff like that. He worked with animals. He was kind of like a Steve Irwin type of character, but
for kids these days, that's Tiger King. It's like Tiger King.
Yeah. Well, and in some ways, Tiger King might even be closer to the energy that we're going for, because I thought you were going to say like Bindi Irwin, or he has a son too. People are into his son now, so that's a whole different
I didn't
thing.
even know he has a son.
Yeah. He's got two children, and they're carrying on his legacy.
It's so funny. I heard a comedian do a bit about that. I don't want to give away the bit, but it's like the idea is that who would have thought that being killed by alligators would be genetic? Like,
I like that. Here's one. I'll raise you one here, which is the thing that the son became known for is the whole 100 men versus one gorilla.
Yeah.
They did an interview with the son, and the son was like, we don't need to be asking 100 men versus one gorilla. We need to be asking how many men does it take to save one gorilla? Which is...
Yeah, that's a Steve Irwin quote there.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so what we're getting is, so Timothy Treadwell is this guy who he would work with animals and stuff like that. And again, he was like on Letterman a little bit, but he was always like kind of kooky. His thing is he lived with grizzlies.
Whoa.
He spent like 1,000 hours living with grizzlies or something like that.
Get that guy on Joe Rogan stat.
Yeah, if only. Well, so he lived in Alaska.
It's like a Joe Rogan wet dream.
Yes.
So funny.
Oh yeah, just doing DMT with
with 1,000
the grizzly
grizzlies.
bears. That's how you really
hunting elk.
It's giving Liver King for sure. Yeah. But he lived with them, and I mean, this is like public record, so I don't really consider that it did. Let's just say it didn't end well. Let's just say you can imagine that it maybe didn't end well.
Yeah.
But basically, in the movie, this guy, because of the fact that he sort of had some sort of like entertainment relationship, whatever, he was that kind of guy. He would record himself while he was kind of like vlogging alone in like the 2000s, early 2000s.
Oh yeah.
But although for his last trip he went with his girlfriend, so it was a perfect date. But there's audio of his ultimate encounter with one of the shit. I think you actually can like go on YouTube and listen to that now. But in the movie, and this was also like YouTube like just barely existed when this movie came out.
YouTube's like what, 2005, 2006?
Yeah, it's right around. So this movie comes out, I believe, in 2007. So that notion of being like anything you want to find, that's not what YouTube was yet by any means. So, but basically in the movie, he plays the audio of the final encounter for like someone who was close to him. And they listen to it, but we as the audience don't listen to it.
Right.
Now, how did this all play out? I mean, somebody, maybe there's some Wikipedia article that's like, would give some sort of detail that I'm not giving here. But what the film is presenting to you, at least, is that this person is like listening to this for the first time, right? And that's documentary ethics right there. Like, you're going to listen to like this forbidden footage. Do we let you have a free take of that beforehand so that you can warm up, or do we capture the authentic response, and what's right there? And actually, I'll do it one deeper.
That's a thinker.
In the actual thing, while he's playing, at a certain point, he's like, I think I'm going to turn this tape off now, because he can see her breaking down. So, it's like, should that have happened in the first place? That's for the ethicists to debate. But also, it is interesting. He takes note of it and then is like, I'm going to go be in the Mandalorian now. I'm going to turn this off.
Yeah, because the question is, like, at what point are you being exploitative?
Yeah. And that's totally bound up with what we're talking about here.
Huh. It's interesting because, like, there are two sides to it. I mean, with documentaries especially. Because, like, okay, so, like, when you got here, one thing I'll find is we can talk about certain things off camera that we're obviously not going to say on camera. So one dance I always find myself doing is, like, almost always, we'll end up talking for a good 10, 15 minutes before we start. And what you'll find is people will say things and that you'll be like, oh, I'm glad we didn't turn the camera on, because they wouldn't have shared that with me if the camera was on.
Sure.
And I think that does, like, open people up and get them to share. And maybe even it makes them more likely to share something that they wouldn't have shared on camera because now they're open. But the other thing is, maybe you just missed something. Maybe they would have shared that on camera and you just took that moment away because you didn't have the camera on. So it is a debate. And I never even considered it with documentaries, because that's a whole different question.
I think it's very important there. Because, especially because there's just so much of this notion in documentary is that the documentarian is often telling the story on behalf of the subject.
Right.
And so
it's a narrative.
Yeah. So it sort of has to deal with, like, what do they want out of it? What are they trying to achieve? And
as the person, the interviewee, you're thinking that already. Like, what is the angle here? Mm-hmm. What are they asking me this for? What's the point of this?
Where is this going to go? And I think that's what it comes down to, because that's what I love about documentary, is that there are so many different kinds. Again, like, some documentaries, like I think like Citizen 4 is one example, is like, it's more about, like, where can you place the camera?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the crazy part of it is like, oh my gosh, like, we got a camera at Fire Festival or whatever. The whole point is, or like, what is it? Fire of Love, the volcano one. Like that, the crazy part is that these two people took the cameras into the volcanoes. You know what I mean? But then other times, there are political documentaries or documentaries like, what is it? Paradise Lost. That was about, like, these killings that happened in the 90s. And the series of films that were made, the Paradise Lost films, were ultimately used as, like, evidence to exonerate people who were put in prison. Right. So sometimes, like, for some people, a documentary has a real social and political purpose that I'm telling this story because people need to know that this thing happened, because we need to change something. Yeah. And so in those sort of things, it really comes down to what is the goal, I think, sometimes, and then sometimes it's like, I'm thinking of, like, Fantastic Fungi. It's like, mushrooms are cool, sometimes it's not as deep as all that, or deep in a different way. So
deep underground with the fungi.
Definitely the mycelial networks for sure. But so I think that's something that when I studied documentary, it really unfolded to me that there are many different ways, just like with narrative, there are many different ways to approach telling a story, and different documentarians are kind of trying to achieve different goals, which necessitate a different relationship with the subject, ultimately.
Yeah, and then sometimes you'll get people who are known for being exploitative or are known for being that way, and so it's like, don't approach that guy. Mm-hmm. You don't want to. I mean, that's funny when it comes to getting interviewed by any news network. That's something you'll see now, especially with comics even. It's like comics don't want to talk to news networks because often they're forming, like, did you see Tim Dillon on CNN? Did you see that?
I have seen this, yes.
That's an interesting watch, because Tim Dillon was saying afterwards, like, I hope they release the full thing, because what these guys are known for is they'll get you in an interview under the context of, we just want to talk, and then they'll end up cutting out like 3 quotes from the interview, and you don't see the whole thing. And when you see the whole thing, it's all laid bare for you. And this is something that it tends to happen over and over again. And I'm trying to, there's some other example that somewhere like deep in the back of my mind, I can't remember who it was now, but they got bamboozled. Like they had thought, because they were approached under the context of, we just want to shine light on this particular topic, whatever the topic is. And then they say, oh yeah, okay, I'll talk to you. And then they talk to them, and what happens, I want to say it's Andrew Huberman, but I might be wrong. And they end up just taking out like 1 quote from everything he says, and it makes him look like the asshole. And actually, you know what? It was Jordan Peterson. It was Jordan Peterson, and like his first, in one of his CNN interviews, it was after the whole like thing with the BBC and all that, and it was just interesting because, for one, he should have known better, but for another thing, it's like, that's how you learn the lesson of, you have to record that stuff yourself.
Sure.
Because then they are incapable of doing something like that. Now it's like, okay, yeah, you can release your version so long as I can release my version, and that's okay. Because you can recontextualize all sorts of things. Like, that's what's dangerous about that type of narrative building, is I might have a way of perceiving you that is not accurate to how you perceive yourself. And it's almost unfair of me to then present you in a way that you wouldn't approve of, but you approved of it because the way I presented the interview to you was not the way I was planning on presenting the interview to everybody else. It's a very slimy thing that you'll see happen.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, it's like, it's a crime against what you're trying to do as an interviewer and as like a newspaper. You want to present the story in a way that's nuanced, so that way we can come to a conclusion. And I think when you do that, you're kind of shitting all over it. Like, now you're making it so that person's probably going to be less likely to talk to somebody like you in the future. You're putting a sour taste in everybody's mouth. It's not doing something good. And what you said when you said that thing about where you can put the camera, it reminded me of the classic Alex Jones and Bohemian Grove thing, because that was what made that what it was he got the camera in behind where they do Bohemian Grove.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, Bohemian Grove is like, it's not a conspiracy. It's a bunch of rich people who go into the woods and burn a sacred effigy and chant what sounds to be demonic, satanic ritual chants. And it's real, and it happens. And it's something they would never admit. And the only way you could expose something like that is putting a camera on it. It's literally the only way.
It's a truth is stranger than fiction moment.
Exactly,
for sure.
Exactly, yeah. And it's just so weird because I think it's more nuanced than like how someone like Alex Jones will present it. He's going to say, oh, it's just this satanic ritual. These people are all demons. It's not quite that. It's probably more like rich people are way weirder than you think, and they're more disconnected from reality than you think. And so the things that they choose to do as like a release from what they see as normal life looks way different than like what you do. Like, you're going to watch a movie. They're going to go in the woods and burn a cross.
I mean, that's kind of what Eyes Wide Shut, that's like what Kubrick is getting at in that whole movie, I think.
Yeah.
With like,
dude, and the story behind that movie is crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my
wild.
God.
It's absolutely wild.
The last movie before he dies, he's like on record saying he wanted to take it further, but they wouldn't let him, whatever that means.
Totally.
I mean, and then like the future, it's so funny how that movie just becomes more and more vindicated over time, like more and more.
Yeah, that's a great example of like, it is a divisive film, and it's also one that I think was sort of, because of his track record up to that point, was sort of not received in the same way.
How so?
I mean, the impression that I got, I think people were like, this is like a weird vibe and too long.
Yeah.
At the time.
What the hell is even going on here?
Yeah, I think that people were just like, can you do Full Metal Jacket again or something like that? But
yeah, that's true, dude. It's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, because all of his films are so like, to me, like every film with him was almost like a different genre. So like, some are gonna sit in your mouth. But I also think it's weird like that he co-wrote AI, that movie. Yeah. And that also came out around shortly after his passing, I think. Yeah. And so like
Spielberg ended up directing it.
Yeah. He was just in like he was in an interesting headspace at that point, I think. But now I think you see that movie in terms of like, I saw like a meme utilizing stills from that movie today.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so that to me says like it has kind of maybe found
a second life.
Yeah, I think so. That movie was also odd, I think, because there were like cut related things. I mean, it was to what you're saying, which is where, but like there's been debate about like the final cut of that movie, but also
and I think some of it is a bit conspiratorial.
I agree with you on that. And also, this is a guy, by the way, they made a whole movie about The Shining, like Room 317 or whatever.
There's letters inside of the intro in the clouds.
He just inspires a certain level.
He's just so well, because the thing is, he's so deliberate that you kind of can do that. That's what's so funny is Kubrick is such a genius that you could overanalyze his films to the point where you are pointing at the clouds and saying there are letters being spelled because he is that deliberate.
You know, we're looking for special messages in the stardust of Disney, of like The Lion King, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, we find, I mean, humans are great at finding things that don't need to be there. But there was some stuff I do believe with maybe like international cuts of Eyes Wide Shut, where it's like there was like extra footage in the European version or something like that, maybe. So it's kind of an interesting film where it's been like, I think that was one that there wasn't an easy way to quote unquote see that movie properly around its original release, I think.
Yeah. I mean, and really what I'm saying when I say that it's different now is I think like when you see something like Epstein, or you see something like all of these people come out of Hollywood and there's all these weird stories of like, oh yeah, every show you've ever liked growing up had some weird thing happening behind the scenes. And then you see something like Eyes Wide Shut, and it makes you think, well, what did Kubrick know that we didn't know?
I mean, and that was also, I mean, that's totally to your point, well before...
Way before.
You know, like
this is the early 90s.
Now we're like baked into this period, the late 90s, I believe.
Oh, late 90s. Okay.
Just, you know, because I don't want them in the comments thinking we don't know what we're talking about. I think really to your point, that's so baked into like our everyday existence. I mean, some level of suspicion or distrust, or I mean, I guess it's all positional for some people. They're like part of that group, so they probably view it differently. But like for your average working person, right? Somebody we might both see at an open mic or something like that. It's so common to have that like suspicion of authority and kind of this assumption that there are sort of, you know, levels to the simulation that we're not seeing or whatever. And yeah, I mean, that may be part of why that movie didn't slap as hard at that time, because the pump hadn't been primed yet for people to be like, yo, the 1% is built a little different. You know?
And watching it now, it almost seems like it could have been made today. You're like,
I would agree.
It would resonate way differently if it came out today.
I think so too. I think so too. I mean, there's a great movie, The Square. It's a Swedish film by Ruben Östlund that came out in like 2017. Basically, it takes place at an art museum, I want to say, in Sweden. I think this is all right. But they have like a party at one point. This is a great movie. They have a party for the people who work at the museum at one point, and it basically is that it's like an aristocratic party almost. And I'll just say, you know, the things that they do, the spectacle that they sort of put together for these wealthy people in this space is like totally representative of what we're talking about, of basically like, in a weird way, it almost kind of like flips back to like the concept, like the whatever, like Roman or Greek or whatever, like bread in circuses, and you know, that there was kind of this idea like for the wealthy that the spectacle, right, that life is this spectacle, and so they would be very over the top in how they would enjoy themselves. And so it is interesting to see, you know, sort of film is probably one of the ways, I think, in this day and age that you actually see people comment on
film, comedy, music, I think art in general.
The sort of I guess overindulgence of the elite, let's say.
Well, because I think like humanizing it is the way you help people understand it. That's why I think art can be effective in that, because I think that if you just say that these things are happening, I think it's harder to understand. Like, it doesn't sound right. I mean, if you're just like an ordinary person, you're like, well, who would do something like that? but it's hard for you to put yourself in the frame of mind of somebody else. It's hard for you to actually try to see through somebody else's eyes. And I think art helps you to achieve that, you know? I think that's the beautiful thing about art. I think that's what art can do better than anything else. That's why I love writing music, because I find that what I can communicate through a song is going to be far more effective than even if I could say it with words, because I can try to paint a picture for you so that way you can connect with it in a way you wouldn't otherwise connect. I think that happens with comedy. I think that if a joke is structured well, you'll find a truth in it that you didn't even know resonated with you. You'll be like, oh, that's funny, that makes sense, but oh, that's I didn't even know I thought that way. Well, I mean, one of my favorite Mark Norman bits, I don't know if you ever heard it. You ever heard his joke about, I think it's grape juice or something like that?
I don't think so.
I don't want to butcher it, but it's like, okay, so it's a joke about pedophiles. And the joke is naturally, right?
Like the last 10, 15 minutes of this conversation.
Yeah, right. Yes. Just can't get off that. And so he is basically saying that when pedophiles, it's crazy, you know, like these guys it sucks, you know, it would suck to be like that. I mean, just think about it. I mean, when I was 8, I loved grape wine and I liked 8-year-old girls. Now I'm 28 and I I already fucked it up. See, so it's like when I was 8, I liked grape juice and 8-year-old girls. Now I'm 28 and I like grape wine. And that's the joke.
There you go.
Essentially implying that it's almost like you liked one thing, but you let go of the other thing. And these people just never let go of that one thing. And it's such a touchy topic, but it approaches it in a way where it almost humanizes the people that he's talking about. And it's like the type of thing that nobody would ever connect with, nobody would ever understand. But by presenting it like that, it like clicks in your mind. And as you're laughing at the joke, you are understanding the mentality of a pedophile. And I think that that's something that is super effective. Like, I think that doing things like that is the only way that we can actually get towards an actual understanding of evil and like how humanity ends up doing things like that, you know? And art can achieve that. It's like I did not see the what's that latest Oppenheimer. I didn't see Oppenheimer. Yeah. But a movie like that can teach you how you end up making the worst thing that could ever be made. Because you don't make a nuclear bomb trying to murder 2-3 million people. You come up with all these reasons on why it's okay to make a nuclear bomb, because we have to do this and we have to do this and we have to do this. And you could say here now in the comfort of 2025 existence, oh, I would never do something like that. But that's just not something that you would ever truly understand, because you aren't the guy that was in that position. You know, it's like I think one thing that I had heard Jordan Peterson say many times is like, you would think I would never be the guy in a Nazi watchtower. I would never do that. But the problem is, you've never been in 1938 Germany. You've never existed in that. You've never had a government that was telling you one thing, and you've never felt the oppression of somebody else while they're telling you that. And it's not to say that either of those things are right or wrong. It's to say that there's a humanity in that. There's like, people end up doing evil things and they justify it. No one's the villain in their own story. And I think like the only way we connect with each other and we get past all that shit is by understanding each other. And so I think art is just the most effective thing. And I think reading and I think learning, you have to have this open mind if you truly do want to expand and understand. Like, you have to set aside your preconceptions and just think, okay, so just imagining that I know nothing, or imagining that I don't have this reality that I'm within, how could I then put myself in the position of somebody else? Because you'd be amazed the things that people can justify and the things that people think are okay, you know? And if you want the world to change, you don't change the world by rejecting the ideas of others. You have to shift the ideas of others. And that is the hard thing. You know, that takes understanding. It takes a certain level of extending yourself outwards, you know, in a way that's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. You have to allow yourself to observe things you don't agree with.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's, you know, I was raised Buddhist. And so that would, you know, I mean, that's part of the whole story of the Buddha, essentially, as a historical figure.
To let go of the self, yeah.
And also this notion that, I mean, like, was raised as a prince and sort of raised inside of, you know, castle walls or whatever, and then leaves at some point. Part of what kind of sparks his spiritual journey in the historical story of the Buddha is that when he finally leaves, he realizes what the world is actually like. You know, He goes into the village beneath the kingdom and sees, like, that people get sick, that people, you know, live in poverty, that people are hungry, you know, things that he doesn't have any experience with in, you know, living in in a walled palace. And that is part of what sparks him to kind of reconsider his own spiritual growth, is
Interesting.
seeing the reality of the world. So I do agree in that sense that, I mean, part of understanding yourself and trying to, like, grow in the lifetime that we exist in is, yeah, I mean, you have to put yourself in concert with things that resonate with you and things that don't, and you have to understand how to navigate them. But yeah, I mean, I had a very isolated childhood, I would say. Like, I was an only child. My parents moved a lot, so there weren't a lot of consistent people in my life growing up because we were moving all the time. And, you know, I mean, the amount of sort of personal growth I had, you know, both inside and out, interpersonally, socially, emotionally, all of these things. I mean, once I had kind of reached a place near the end of high school where I had a little bit more stability, I was in the same place for like a couple of years, the growth was incredible for me. But it was like, that was all reflective of like, oh, what I needed in part was to be able to interact with and absorb other ideas. I mean, it's kind of like the idea like with a baby, right? It's like babies who receive human contact when they're initially born, like in the early stages of being born, their immune system develops differently. There's like all these positive benefits that come along with some level of touch. And so it's kind of like, if you don't get that, if you're like hermetically sealed, whether that's like, you know, physically, but also like just kind of like emotionally, or like, you know, you're not allowed or able to build those deeper relationships. You know, everybody's different, but at the end of the day, I think like for the most part, as someone who really did experience that, like you're going to be stunted by it.
Yeah.
You know, you're just not going to have the exposure that you need to be able to navigate different ideas, negotiate different beliefs, and ultimately like determine for yourself, do I really believe these things, or is this just kind of what I've been given to believe?
Yeah, and I think like what's weird now is you'll have people who are in the illusion of like it's hard to see you're in a bubble, because I think like social media and the way it'll curate things for you, you can be convinced that what you're seeing is the truth. And the problem is it's not going to show you things that are outside of that bubble, because it knows that's what you want to see. And so you have to actively search for things that aren't what you believe and are stuff that you disagree with. So it's like that same exact thing you're describing, except you can't even see that that's what's happening. Like you're sheltered, but you don't know you're sheltered because it's sheltering it for you. And you have the illusion of being connected because it looks like you're connected. I mean, I'm seeing all these people say things.
Sure.
This video's got 1 million likes. I mean, how this got to be true. But yeah, it's got 1 million likes from all the people who agree with what this thing is. And that goes for both sides, right? It's not just this side and it's not just this side. Both sides are like stuck inside these bubbles. And it becomes this thing where it's harder to connect with people who are outside of you, because and that's the way you grow. That's the way that you really do understand things on a deeper level, because I don't think the truth is ever so binary. And I think that's what Buddhism will tell you, is that it's not this, it's not that, it's kind of both. And that's a hard truth to accept, that it's both at the same time, because it's much easier to think that it's either good or bad, and everything is either good or bad, or I'm either right or wrong, or it's either true or false. And odds are reality just ain't that simple, you know? Like every pain contains wisdom. Like all bad things contain good things, whether you like it or not, you know? And I think the world will teach you that if you engage with the world, but you have to engage with it.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, one of the things that is going to, I think, emerge over our lifetimes is sort of different levels of willingness to do that.
Yeah, because now there's a necessity for it.
Yeah. And it's become quite rare. And even what we were talking about before we started, this idea of like part of maybe, let's say, existing in the entertainment industry is, I mean, I think about like Kenny Beats as an example.
Oh, wow.
There's a Kenny Beats interview where he talks about like producing, and he's like, what most producers don't understand is like, you know, half of what I do is like being in the studio with someone and being able to be, and you know, whatever else he said here, this part is correct. He goes, being a real fucking human being.
Yeah, I mean, what is that studio session thing he does? You remember what it's called?
The Cave.
The Cave, yeah. And a lot of that show is exactly that. It's him
that's
just
true.
Sitting with somebody,
Drinking yerba
vibing.
mates with Thundercat, and, you know, whatever.
And they'll find the vibe in that. And I once talked to a producer, and like he was saying, yeah, I'll make some beats for you. But he was saying that he wanted to like hang with me because that's how he does it. That's his process. He can't just send me a beat that he's already made. He wants to hang with me and kind of figure me out and find the thing. And to me, that's like so much more of an organic approach as a producer, as a musician.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because what you're going to do is it's going to be a collaborative process, and we are going to find something together, you know? And he's going to, and Kenny Beats, that's interesting because he is kind of that guy, isn't he? Yeah, he's kind of like an open book in that sense, where he just lets somebody come in and they just kind of shoot the shit for half an hour, and eventually you have, you know, a banger.
Yeah, his production's kind of random in that regard too, where I think he's very like he can just fit to the person.
Yeah.
And I think there's good and bad that comes with that, because sometimes for me personally, it's like I want something a little more idiosyncratic.
Yeah,
you know
you're
what
less
I mean?
distinctive.
I want, and I, you know, this is my personal, like I remember when he put out, I think it was called Louis, was his like a solo album that he put out. And with that one, it personally, even though like they're, you know, it's about his dad and there's some other things going on, personally I found it a little bland, actually, you know. So it's like I do think it cuts both ways, where it's like, you know, part of it is he can like meld to whatever, but it's also like, you know, sometimes you really like somebody for, you know, exactly what they do, and that like only they can do it. Like, I mean, this is a totally different musical example, but somebody like Burial as an example, the British electronic producer, it's like, yeah, that guy can like only, you know, be making like these weird beats out of like hiss and crackle and stuff like that.
And that's,
you know?
like too far in that
Yeah,
way.
I mean,
now
it's
he's
just-
never
it's-
going to make a song with Lil Wayne.
Yeah. No, certainly not. Certainly not. So, you know, again, it's sort of, there's pluses and minuses to these things, but I think that to his credit, you know, and somebody like Kenny Beats working with like Schoolboy Q and stuff like that, I mean, a lot of his stories, and I think The Cave is reflective of this, you know, involve him epitomizing really that notion of being able to be a good hang. And I also think like when he was doing like the Twitch beat battles and stuff like that during like the early COVID era, is an example of like making yourself accessible to people, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can come on Twitch and you can send me your beat and we're going to listen to it, and we might roast it, you know, if it's bad, but it's also like, you know, that's a guy that you want to crack a yerba mate with, you know, ideally.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to me, that constant debate of like, okay, so I think making definitive choices, and I think like paving a way for yourself and creating a voice for yourself, you are going to turn people away as you do so. Because what's going to happen is the more and more you are definitive and make choices that are entirely you, it's going to make you less flexible. And that's good. That's good and bad, right? Like I think that you don't want to be entirely like a fence sitter. You don't want to be a person without opinions. And so you have to somehow walk this line of like standing a ground and having an opinion and having a stance and believing things, but also being open and also being, you know, flexible and plastic and being shapeable, because both of those things are valuable, you know. And it's easy to lean too far in one direction, but I think you go too far the other way, and now you have no identity. Now you're nothing. Now you're literally whoever walks in the room, you're that person. And then somebody else walks in, you're that person. And eventually people figure that out, and they're like, oh, so you're no one. But the other way is you become difficult to work with. You become too stuck in your ways. You become ignorant because you're not willing to shift or move or change. And I think like the enlightening way to think would be somewhere in that middle where you can have an opinion but also allow it to be moved and shaped and changed. And that's a weird spot to be in because you have an identity, but you also, it's not so concrete. It's not so stuck in one spot. And it almost feels unstable when you're that way. It almost feels like, you know, like yeah, you know who you are, but being open to ideas makes you kind of vulnerable, you know?
Yeah, I think it's hard to, I mean, this makes me think of my experience with film direction because it's like I would work with different directors and then I would also direct my own things. And I think in film, as an example, like having a vision is really important because you're working with all these collaborative people, like this big crew. And, you know, sometimes it's kind of like if you don't have a clear idea, the people on the crew, I mean, it all depends, but like by and large, like, I mean, they want the production to go well.
Yeah.
They want to support you, right? And so sometimes it's like if we're hitting a bottleneck and we only have so much time, we're, you know, every moment we're not making a decision, we're falling a little behind.
Yeah.
All these people around you, they want to like give you ideas and they want to support you and like make something happen,
Yeah.
right? And so, you know, one of two things or three things can happen there. It's like you as the director, it's like you might have your own vision of what we need to do and only you understand truly what that is, right? And so then you can like put your head in the sand and be like, no, we have to do it this way. Like if we don't get this tracking shot, it's just not going to work, right? Mm-hmm. And I've seen scenarios where, you know, somebody has tanked a set because it's like we blew all this time on this thing that just wasn't anything. Yeah. But I've also seen it where it's like I was sitting in the theater months later and I saw the shot and I was like, well, it's probably we did a good thing waiting to try to get that. That was worth calling grace, I guess. Or that was, you know, that was like we didn't need that other shot as much as we needed this. And so sometimes I've seen instances where it's like the director really knowing what they wanted paid off, you know? But I've also seen the sort of flip side where it's like the other people, you know, are just trying to like fill in the blanks to make it work. Mm-hmm. And then the director, maybe they don't have a strong sense of what they're trying to achieve, or they feel they buckle under the pressure and they just go with something that somebody suggests because they know that will move it along and get it done. And we need to do something ultimately. And then you see it later and you're like, yeah, this really wasn't very cohesive.
Yeah.
Or you hear them and they're like, oh, this just didn't turn out the way that I wanted. And it's like, well, yeah, because your AD gave you this idea of how we could condense these shots so that we could get through it faster so we could make the day, which was great. But in the midst of that, we lost the sauce, essentially. It's really hard, actually.
I'm pretty, like, I've never worked on a film, but from what I've heard, that's a lot of it, right, is compromise.
Oh, man.
Is like, what are we willing to compromise? And, oh, so-and-so didn't show up today, or we're missing this today.
Oh, yeah.
We're not making time. And the best directors are the ones who can handle compromise the best, it seems like.
Yeah, and I think maintain a vision. And
exactly,
this is where, like, you know, if I were to compare it to other things, I mean, I think in comedy, you know, one example might be like the types of rooms you do, types of materials you do in certain rooms, like what gigs you take. You know, in music, I would think, you know, especially with rap, it's maybe like what producers you're working with. And also like maybe for like a EP or an album length project, like what level of cohesion are we really looking, you know, for here? That's why like sometimes like I think about like, you know, the earliest Danny Brown, I guess once he was Danny Brown, was like, I think his name's like Paul Walker, was like this person. He did a lot of the XXX beats, and he mostly worked with the same guy for a period of time. And I kind of like that because I think there is a cohesion. I like albums all produced by one person in rap. I mean, I also
that's how I try to do it.
Yeah, I also like something like a Nas, you know, like I think about like the Illmatic kind of has like a little bit of, there's like only a couple producers. It's like DJ Premier or like I want to say like Easy Moby or something like that. There's only like a handful of producers, and it kind of like switches like every other track, you know? And so I kind of like that too, where it's kind of like we kept the circle close, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like a big Wu-Tang fan too as well. So it's like those RZA produced albums. I'm like, this guy gets it. You know what I mean? So I like that kind of stuff. But I do think that that's a challenge sometimes, and it comes down to like what the project is ultimately. But anyway, I give these other examples and other art forms, but what I'm really trying to express is that it's like, I think the most important part is when you are the director, whatever kind of director that might be, that might just be like, as the artist, you're essentially directing this album, right? It's your album. It's going to have your name on it, you know, especially when it's more independent. Maybe you don't have like a label meddling or whatever. You need to maintain the vision, and film really taught me that, because I think, again, it is so collaborative. I mean, a small short film might have a crew of 15 people. I mean, of course there are smaller ones, but I'm saying like when I was at UT Austin making short films, the bare bones, like earliest short films, if you're including the people who worked in post, you know, we're talking 10 to 15 people, which is still a big group of people. Yeah. And so they're all, you know, ideally in the way that they can, in their best interest, they're all adding their little spice to the gumbo and trying to make it work. But it's just like, I mean, the fight for, you know, let's say creative vision, and not hopefully creative dictatorship, but creative vision. I mean, it is a battle, dude. It really is. And I see that in a lot of different types of art forms, comedians recording DIY specials, you know, things of that nature. Like, I think it's really a fight to have the vision and really have it, and then also make sure that you're creating a good environment for people to work in, but that the vision isn't getting diluted, because time, money, ego, all these things will make you compromise, and then it's really not uncommon to end up at the end and either the vision was lost, or unfortunately it's also not uncommon to end up at the end and realize that it sounds bad, but that the vision wasn't really there too. Maybe this person didn't do the work that they needed to do at the beginning to understand exactly what they wanted, and then every piece of it after that was influenced by that. And that's why you have the concept of things like a vanity project, right? Because I mean, you know, of course I want us all to ascend and create our most beautiful creative work, but you know, the reality is like the more creative project that I witnessed being made, the more I realized like how important it is to do the work, you know, pre-production, production, post-production, to maintain the thing you're trying to create. Because, you know, you can go in with a half-baked idea, and you can even do things right. You can have good production value and things like that. But, you know, if you didn't really have it figured out from the beginning, that will usually reveal itself, I think.
Yeah. And it's up to you to maintain it. Like you said, like no one's going to do that for you.
No, absolutely not.
Nobody.
I mean, I remember the first, like, I guess it was the second narrative short film I ever made. It was set in a laundromat. And I made it with a Austin comedian, because I was living in Austin at the time, Angelina Martin, who's thriving right now in Austin, is very funny. And I made it with Angelina, and it was set in a laundromat. It was a person that Angelina plays trying to do laundry. And I was so new to narrative filmmaking because I'd done more doc that I didn't even realize like I needed a production designer. You know, I needed somebody to like, you know, dress up this laundromat a little bit, because the whole point of the story was that it's like an empty laundromat, but you know, that's fine, but that doesn't mean like we're not going to have like a single prop in here. Yeah. So, you know, I remember I went to a laundry facility, or like it was like a bulk clothing place where you could buy a bunch of like used clothing, and I bought all of this laundry that I was going to put in there. And I remember like I put it all in these hampers and stuff around there, and I'm doing this myself. Not that this is like that's so dramatic, but it's just the point is that I didn't know that someone else who probably understands like what it should look like better than I do,
because I don't
even see that well.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, you know, why I'm like, so we're going to put the hamper here. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I should know that. And so I remember doing it, and so I was shooting in this laundromat overnight for like 3 or 4 nights in a row, right? People are pulling all-nighters. I mean, somebody on the crew told me they'd never pulled an all-nighter before, so it's like we're just making the best of it, right? And so another role that is very important that I think is maybe a little bit less well known about is, you know, you have somebody on set a scriptie, who's responsible for being like, where was that object? Are we putting it back in the same place? Because you come back the next day, it's like, did we put the hamper back in the same place? Was that light on? What are you, were you wearing that shirt?
'Cause that's how you get continuity errors.
Yes, exactly. And so the script supervisor is responsible for that. And that's also things like making sure that the lines on the page are said.
Yeah.
Because you might leave out a detail and then it's like, you go back and you listen to it later and you're like, well, we didn't clarify.
And you shot that 3 months ago.
That the laundromat is not open at this time.
Yeah.
You didn't say that, so now the audience isn't going to know that. So now either we have to work around that, or hopefully they said it in a different take, or we're recording ADR lines to fix it. The whole point of this is I'm putting the laundry on the table. My script supervisor,
like 5 jobs.
Yeah. And that's, that's DIY filmmaking. That's indie filmmaking. That's fine. But my whole thing is that, I'm like doing all those things and I just don't even know better, and to your point, like, other people will try to support you, but also like at a certain level of DIY-ness too, I think if you're not like communicating and delegating like what's even important, they're not even gonna know. So it's like, I feel like that's an example. The whole point of this story is that I'm putting the laundry in the baskets and putting it on the table. And it's like, I don't even, would it have been nice to have had somebody else there to worry about that? Yeah. But also, was I even like really taking the time to communicate, like, this is the level of set dressing that I'm doing for this thing? I think that's how you can end up sometimes in like almost this, I've seen it on sets before. You almost see a director like going haywire over small details, and it's because they probably feel like they're the only one like noticing or catching, or the only one who cares about those things. But the flip side of that is like, usually it is also reflective of like, it can be a little bit of getting lost in the sauce on details, but it's also probably like the team just wasn't communicating, right? Because if the team was communicating, most likely either somebody else would have taken care of that, or you wouldn't be, again, like I was in that moment, you're just putting the laundry in the basket on set by yourself. That's not a story about like what other people didn't do right. It's a story about me needing to learn how to communicate and delegate more as I did more of these projects.
Yeah, which is probably how it tends to go, like with filmmakers. You probably do end up having that type of experience.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like, I didn't have to do that, but it's your first film, it's your second film. Like, how are you supposed to know unless you've been on a set before?
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
And like filmmaking, I think it's something that's easy to look at from the outside in and go, oh, that movie just sucks. It's so easy to just look at a movie and say it sucks.
And a lot of them do.
A lot of them do. And the truth of it is way more in like, it's that gray area again. It's like, it's not really simple as it's good or bad. It's like a film is such a complex thing. It's a miracle that anything even gets made. Like the fact that things get finished is amazing. So
I agree.
Just take that first. Like, look at that part first. Okay, well, it's a miracle this got done. And now we can talk about what's good and bad about it, because a lot of it's probably just little things along the way that snowball into other things. And like, a bad actor, often the actors get blamed, or often the director gets blamed, but really it's not just that person. It's a chain of things that led to that thing you don't like. It's not just one guy you can pin it on.
Yeah. I mean, production delays definitely come to mind. I mean, I remember like I lost in a longer short film that I made, like I lost a whole day due to like just potential rain delays and things like that.
Yeah.
I was shooting it on in kind of like a ranch style area, where to get to the area I needed to shoot in, you had to drive over mud. Or like dirt, let's say.
Yeah.
But then with the rain, people were worried about the mud. And I had a friend who had shot a short like a month earlier, and there had been rain, which had turned dirt into mud, and cars had gotten stuck. And so I'm over here, and I can't drive, by the way. I mean, I have all these drivers and, but it's like my crew, it's like, stitched together with all these different cars and the U-Haul and all these different things. It was like a pretty ambitious production at the time for me. And I'm like, do I want to send all these cars along this road where like if it's rained too much, some of them might get stuck? And then I'm the one, like I'm the, that's where like people will say sometimes with film, the longer you do it, or like the more ambitious the production, the more it becomes almost like, you know, they call it like a company move, you know, or it almost becomes in a way like militaristic, I would argue, because it's like you got walkie-talkies, you know, all this sort of stuff. And so it's like, okay, I'm the general, right, of in this situation, and I'm going, Autobots roll out, you know what I mean? But then if they get stuck, that's on me, dude. So it's like, I remember losing a day, and I mean, I was just talking about this with one of the people, with my composer for the short, like in the last week or two. We were reminiscing, because when I work with him as the guy who makes the music for the film, he gets the footage and we talk about it, but every once in a while I'd like give him a little lore. I'd be like, oh yeah, you know, like when we talk about this performance, you know, this happened. And I'm like, you know, we were talking about some of the footage on some of the days. And I'm like, well, you know, a good thing to keep in mind is we were supposed to have this extra day and then we didn't. So it's like, maybe they seem a little, you can see it in the performance a little bit. And it's like, well, you know, what you don't know and what no one will ever really know is that we lost this day. So we were shooting a lot more in those following days because we, you know, and it's like maybe everybody would have been a little bit more like, you know, if that hadn't happened. But those are the things nobody will ever know. Now, I don't go, so that's my excuse. I hope, you know, you guys still like it.
Yeah, it's just like filmmaking 101.
Yeah, it's just, it is what it is. But to your point, I mean, there are a lot of things that come along with it. It's part of what became appealing to me at a certain point about comedy is I get on stage and, you know, I mean, fingers crossed the microphone works, but you know,
it's relying on you and you alone.
Yeah. And I mean, I still like to think that I'm doing both. I didn't just turn my back on that as soon as I picked up a microphone. But I do appreciate that aspect of kind of like you show up, you're responsible for your performance. I mean, yeah, of course there's other things. And if you go further and you want to like do a special or something, I mean, eventually you will have to, you know, your social media marketing, you have to have creative input on what you're doing. So that doesn't go away. But man, I mean, you know, yeah, sometimes I'm like, I just need to take the train to the club. I don't need to be responsible for 10 cars driving on a dirt road that might have rain on it, and we're shooting underneath a cabin. And oh, by the way, someone just told me there's a snake in the leaf pile under the cabin. So, by the way, nobody go over there. You know, just things like that. You know, that all of a sudden that makes a heckler seem kind of appealing.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what gravitated me towards music. I mean, I've never like, even with sports, right? I've never been somebody who's like a team sport player. I don't know what it is in me, and just not really appealing to me. But if it was track, I would love that. And I think the difference, or like golf or like skating, I would like that. And the difference is that that's me. That's dependent on me. I don't have to rely on you. I don't have to hope you do your thing right. And I'm not responsible for you. I'm responsible for me. And everything I do is reflective of me. And that is so much safer in my mind, you know. I can control that. That's all in my control. Maybe there's elements that are going to affect that, but ultimately I'm the one to blame, and ultimately if I do well, I get the credit because it was me. And so I there's something about that is appealing to me in a way that other things would not be. Like even being in a band, I was in a band once, and it's just so fundamentally different than being like a solo artist, because now what you're doing is you are feeling things out and like, okay, so what are we going for here? And like, oh, do you guys like this? And like when you're on stage, people can give you input that maybe you don't agree with, but you guys are in a team, so you have to work together. And those things don't exist when you're by yourself. And I think that, to me, I've always felt so much more secure by myself. I just feel like I can do my own thing. And as soon as you start introducing other people, it's kind of like a domino effect. Like now you are just hoping that everything is going to align, and you're hoping that things are going to work out, where you didn't have to do that when you were by yourself. You could just have fun.
Yeah, film to me is a perfect example of like the sort of exponential effect of that. And by the time I got to this film that I'm describing with the driving, and I had a stunt coordinator, there was blood on screen, all these things I'd never done before. I'm working with
Can people see it? Is it out there anywhere?
It's it's pretty close to being done actually. So I think early next year it's like a 20-minute short film, and I've spent a lot of time just kind of like tweaking, working with my composer, things like that. So it'll be out in 2026 is the plan. It's
tentative title.
It's called Godhead. It's always been called Godhead.
Godhead.
Yeah, Godhead.
Good name.
Yeah, for sure. But I will say that. Yeah, to me, film was like the exponential version
Dickheads,
of that.
dockheads, godheads.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We got it all. It's it's all, the cabeza is very important.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So what I'll say is that was like an example where I almost felt like, especially with my vision, because I'm legally blind and totally colorblind. So I'm very aware on set of what I can and can't see. You know, sometimes I would be like, why am I at this film school with my blind ass right now? You know, I definitely ask those questions. But I will say that, I saw the exponential. I was almost like, I can see how this can get too big.
Yeah.
I can see how it can get so big. When I was on the walkie-talkie, I was like, I feel like this is getting away from me right now. I was like, this is cool because I'm making like an action, thriller kind of short. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, this is what you have to do. And everything up to that point that I had made, it was more like comedy drama, like Ingmar Bergman, more like heavy, thoughtful, realistic. This was the first time I'm like, okay, so this person needs to get tackled and they're going to fall onto a mat, and then we're going to shoot a struggle, and they're going to be struggling with a gun involved, and then someone's going to get shot, and then we're going to have a close-up of the wound, and then they're crawling to the car like Kill Bill or something like that. This was all new for me, right? So it's like you get so many people involved, it can become quite overwhelming. And it kind of makes me think, honestly, so part of my background as well is in long distance backpacking. I hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2015, and there's a saying that is kind of in the thru-hiking community that, it's more complicated than this, but I do think this is like a funny thing to meditate on. And I did the Appalachian Trail. I started and ended on the same day with another person. So I did it as part of a duo. We weren't together the whole time, but we did start and end together. But there's a lot of, there's this concept in thru-hiking, long-distance backpacking, that emerged as I was kind of doing it that's called like a tramily. And a tramily is like the other people on the long-distance hike that you kind of group up with, right? And maybe you do a portion or all of it with them, and that's your tramily. And another kind of adjacent phrase that I would hear sometimes, like trail wisdom, there's a lot of that, is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
And again, like, what you were saying about like bands and stuff like that, it's like sometimes you're like, actually we're together and we are not going far. We're not going far because of you and you and you, because you're late and we need a new drummer, and there's a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But in a thru-hiking concept, when you see people who are breaking fastest known time records and, doing the AT in like 45 days and stuff like that, they're crushing it. Sometimes they're supported, but like the unsupported records, those people are just like doing it themselves. And so many times along the trail, I would meet somebody really cool, and I could tell that they had a fast hiking pace, and we might hang out for a second or like have a snack or like chat briefly. But a lot of times those people, like I was a pretty slow hiker, a lot of times those people, they would do their thing, they'd get to know you for a minute, and then they'd be like, all right, I gotta go, and they're just on to the next thing, right? And that's how they're doing 30-mile days and all that sort of stuff. But also, when you are, looking at duos or groups of people hiking, I mean, sometimes it's like, all right, we're going to carry the tent. You take the body, I'll take the poles.
Yeah.
And that's how we're going to do it. Or,
far.
Like I'll take the stove and you take the food. And it's like, it really can lighten your load. And I mean, it's why like when I play video games, I like cooperative games. I love playing co-op because I'm like, it's that much richer if we can do it together, and also like cover my blind spots, but it's just like group projects in school, man. It's like, if you got a good squad, this is going to go great.
Yeah.
If you don't, that's how you end up doing the project. You're building the volcano alone.
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to do that.
Painful.
Yeah, not a good thing. Not a good thing. You're always just glad when it's over. And also like even at those people that kind of like jam out on like doing it all alone, because like secretly they're like, well, I didn't really care what any of you thought anyway. I wanted to make my own Rube Goldberg machine. So even those people, it's like that also doesn't help you in the long run. That also reinforces you to be more in your own world, which is like usually bad.
Yeah. Like Like the thing about independence is that it only goes so far. Yeah. Like it's very good and it does great things, but I think that the world would benefit from more of a focus on codependence, truly, because that's where things grow and that's where things, I think, like putting it though, I mean, the way you just put it is as simple as it could be put. You know, you go farther. Like, yeah, you can go fast, but going farther takes a team, and you're not going to build something greater than yourself by yourself. You just can't. It's just impossible. There's a limit, you know, you hit the ceiling. And I think that it's about where you're aiming, I guess, but I just think that so much of the world focuses on like, no, just ignore everybody else, just do you. And for me, the most gratifying things, the most meaningful things I've ever experienced have come through cooperation and interaction and collaboration. Like that stuff is what leads to truly meaningful things and what takes me further, you know? There's a great Einstein quote, right? I can only see so far because I stood on the shoulders of giants. And that's such an awesome quote because it's like, you know, you think of Einstein as the smartest guy in the world. Oh, his discoveries were the best discoveries ever. Yeah, he wouldn't have any of those discoveries if he didn't rely on hundreds of other people before him and utilize the information they gave him. And if he didn't work with all these people and he wasn't so cooperative, he would just be some guy in a basement. That's what he would be. And he would be just as smart, but he would not have been Einstein. And so it's the story of history, really. It's like you want to do something that's truly making a difference, you got to learn to be a team player.
Yeah. It's you know, I prefer, you know, a little more PvE than PvP.
Yeah.
You know, I'd rather work with others than fight.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we all, you know? Yeah, but some people just have that, you know, I don't know, that type of personality where some people
radically independent.
Some people jam out on that, you know. And I mean, I can't deny that. I mean, there's a lot of work that I really appreciate that has come from somebody being able to really like zero in.
Yeah, I mean, look at like a Stephen King.
Yeah.
Like, he's not working with anybody.
No, so
he's just doing coke and writing books.
It's as it should be, you know, as God intended. I'm pretty sure. But I mean, you know, all that's great, but also, I don't know. I agree with you in the sense that I think a lot of my most enriching personal experiences, you know, it's they've been shared with others.
Yeah,
I
shared.
think that's huge.
I mean, did you ever read the book Into the Wild?
Yeah, of course, and the movie, seen the movie, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, right before he died, the quote is "Happiness is only real when shared."
Yeah.
And that's, to me, it's like, you know, you can only come to that conclusion when you've reached the end of you've went so far with independence that you realize, oh shit, I've squandered all of those opportunities I had to share this happiness. Like, I was so sure that I would find happiness here in solitude by myself, and only once you get there do you truly realize, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And it's kind of a sad thing. Like, he had to figure it out the hard way, and it's good that he shares that wisdom. But damn, like, it sucks that you have to get that far to really see it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I mean, many such cases, I'll say that. You know, I just think that that's, you know, in pursuit of, you know, one thing or another, I think we be, you know, it's very easy to become like, you know, one directional or sort of like focus solely on that to the detriment of everything else. I mean, another thing I think we're talking about too that just makes me think about, like, you know, again, that idea of like going far or going fast is just like, yeah, kind of like the speed running mentality. I think that, like, in this day and age, because so much information is available to us, and because as well of like extended lifespans and things like that. So you have, like, I saw a thing recently that was talking about the idea that you have like 5 generations in the workforce concurrently right now, which is crazy to think about because people are living longer, retirement, people need to work than when they wouldn't have in the past because of, you know, resources that are available and things like that. But I think because so much information is available, like, you see a lot of that now where it's like people just want to like crack the code on a thing as fast as possible. And there's this attitude of like, I just want to, you know, even if I have to use glitches, I'm going to get there, you know? And it is interesting because it's like, I kind of get that in the sense that, like, when I'm doing something, like, I find going fast can be rewarding. Like it feels, that's always how I think. And I think in comedy, I feel this a lot because some of the people when I first started in Chicago who really influenced me, were like very rapid. And I admire that. And I think I was even trying to emulate that at the time. But it is interesting because it's like that sort of speed run, it's like it feels good to go fast. You know what I mean? Again, to your point, that's why people do cocaine, right? It feels good to go fast.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because it's like I think in a lot of aspects of life, and I mean, like I work in an office as an example with a lot of like Gen Z coworkers, and sometimes I see that.
Sorry to hear that.
Hey, I mean, they're an interesting bunch. It's like I'm on the ground floor. I just like to think of it as like, they're going to take care of me when I'm in the nursing home. That's how I just try to treat them well.
They're in charge of my fate.
Yeah, absolutely. I just hope, that they just, give me.
Gotta be a team player.
Yeah, give me a phone. It doesn't have to be a working phone, but at least give me a phone and I can press the buttons.
Hopefully it's not going to be like, what is it? Ben Stiller in what movie is that? I always get them mixed up. It's not Happy Madison, or it's not Happy Gilmore.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
You don't want to be Ben Stiller in Happy Gilmore.
No, I mean, what I most, I'm just like, just make sure we have a nice girl dinner at the end of this whole thing. But I do, I see that. I feel like I see that sometimes with their approach to like learning things where it's like, they can, kind of take in and replicate very fast. And that this isn't just about that generation. I think that this is like more like the macrocosm that we're all in with like picking up new skills and information, and you want to learn how to do something. And so it's like, I see people become interested. I saw somebody like the other day who's like watching an anime series that I've watched a lot of, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and they're like inhaling it, you know what I mean? Which is great. I mean, I love that, you know what I mean? And it's fun now we can talk about it more. But it's also interesting where it's just like, it's like Sonic, man. I mean, gotta go fast. I get it, but it's also like, I do think it is interesting to see how pervasive that mentality has become, where it's like everybody wants, to do things quickly. And I mean, look, this isn't totally new, right? I mean, it's sort of like, Andy Warhol talking about like having 15 minutes of fame and things like that. We've always wanted instant gratification. That's really not that remarkable. But I do think when we're living in an era where we're discussing like, are we in a simulation and, things of that nature. And, now we got the little food delivery robots tooling around, and stuff like that. Every, thing like that is another kind of block in the chain towards kind of being, desensitized from like how long things actually take.
Yeah, and what happens when achievement doesn't take the steps that it took to get to the achievement. Yeah, like what does that do fundamentally to the mind?
Yeah.
And also, like, I think that, say, it's like, if a comedian has their first set and it goes great, I think that's bad, because now, like, if you go to an open mic and it goes well for your first time, that's probably bad, because now you're going to think it's always going to be like that. And it's not. It's usually not like that. Like, and so, like, I think it's dangerous to have experiences like that. Or say, like, you're an artist and you write 3 songs and your third song does amazing. Well, that doesn't mean that you're done writing songs. That means you have to keep writing songs, and the third one's good, but you're never done. It's never ever over. And so I think that it becomes very easy to just think of success as this like beautiful thing way up here that you can get, and then when you get a little taste of it, you think that you're going to keep having it. And that's not quite how it works. Like, achievement is constantly pushing and hard work and all this. And at least if you want to feel actually satisfied, because I don't think it's satisfying to just live off of the success of one thing. And like, that's why you'll see people who are too successful who regret it. They're like, oh man, like, I wish that didn't work out as well as it did, because now I feel like everybody just thinks of me as that thing.
Yeah, you get locked into like a character or a caricature, really, of kind of giving people what they want, which I think is very hard. And I think it kind of comes back to sort of what we're talking about with artists, in a way, like the value of being like a people pleasing artist, right? Of being, or like a good hang, or somebody who can like sort of, I can gel with anybody. Like in comedy, it would be like, you can put me on any lineup, you know, and da-da-da. But I've also talked to comedians who I really respect who are like, I enjoy having an adversarial relationship with the audience. And those people would not necessarily be on every lineup, but that doesn't diminish like the depth or value of their artistry.
It can even do the opposite.
I would agree. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Strengthens it.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you know, there's 100 ways to cook an egg or what have you, you know, which is for the best, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge, I think at the end of the day, kind of like also what we were saying about, you know, directing and things like that is, and really, I mean, you were talking about Plato very early on, I think. And, you know, to quote Socrates, know thyself. You know, I think a lot of it really comes down to knowing like what you want to achieve and what you're aiming for will like put you in concert with decisions that will support that. A really experienced comedian who's not actively doing comedy in Chicago right now, to my understanding, and wasn't at the time that I kind of met them, gave me great advice, you know, when I first started, that was to the effect of like, said something along the lines of like, a lot of successful comedians have an understanding of like the audience that they would like their jokes to be for. And that's very interesting because it's like, you know, sometimes I think in the sort of like modern meta of like being an online entertainer, let's say, you're sort of like, I kind of just want it to be for everyone, you know, and I want it to
this massive conglomerate.
And, you know, I want the algorithm to just kind of be like this current that just spreads, you know, I'm fruitful and I multiply and just keep reposting and all this sort of stuff. And what's interesting is, you know, conversely to that point that comedian was making, and also some other successful ones that I've talked to, have kind of actually emphasized more the importance of building a relationship with your audience, finding the people who really are going to invest, you know, whether that's their time or their attention, or for a lot of people, it's who would actually buy a ticket. But also, you know, who are the people that I feel like are going to resonate with this message and actually appreciate it and understand it. And I mean, I think as a working comedian, especially like in the open mic space, like there are differing opinions and values, which I think makes sense. But it's like some people, and I tend to be more of the mindset that's like, oh, I'll do like almost any type of room because I want to work on that skill of just being able to get along with different people and like, you know, finesse difficult situations and things like that. But then there are other people who I really respect who I think have more of that, like, I'm trying to cultivate my audience type of mentality. And I actually think there's a lot of wisdom to that, because sometimes there are, you know, rooms that I'm going to where I'm like,
what am I doing? I'm
banging my head against the wall, or to your point, I mean, I don't want to disparage anybody's like performance space, but just for me personally, where I'm like, you know, oh, okay, I just did that. It went XYZ way, but also like at the end of the day, this might not even be the space that makes the most sense for me. And so then I look at some of those people, and again, it comes back to having a vision, who are like, no, this is what I'm aiming for. And then they're spending their time constructively in support of that. And, you know, there's no, again, you know, one way.
Both are right.
It's not one way, just, and it depends on what you want and what kind of skills you're trying to develop and who you are as a person. But I value that when I see it, because I go, oh, this is a person who has a sense of what they're working towards, and also is trying to approach it with a kind of like economy of motion.
To your point, I saw I think it was, who was it? He's from Legion of Skanks. But I'm going to forget his name right now. But he was talking about how he was at this club, and it was just one of those clubs. He's known for being like a raunchy comic, you know. Legion of Skanks in general.
Right.
That's their whole thing, is they'll just say anything. And so he got invited to this club, and he performs there. And the club, like, somebody in the audience got mad, and it was this whole thing. And his point was, he doesn't feel like it was the audience's fault. He felt like it was the club's fault for booking him. Like, why would they even book him? Because it was the type of club that, you know, you don't say this, you don't say this, you don't say this. And, you know, however you feel about that, just don't book that comic. Just don't book the comic that's going to say all those things. Don't book him and then expect him to change all his material, because if you looked into him for more than 5 minutes, you're going to be like, oh, this isn't the guy for us.
Yeah.
And that you could even say that it's on him in a way, because maybe he should have looked at the club and been like, oh, maybe this isn't the right club for me.
Yeah, why did you accept this?
Exactly, yeah.
Nature, yeah.
And I think that that can become your job as somebody who is making things. And I think you learn through experience, like as a performer, I should say, as somebody who's in like an entertainer, a public entertainer, because you don't want to end up in a situation like that where it's like you have your material and you have what you're comfortable with and you've cultivated this personality, and then you take that and you put it in the wrong place and it's misunderstood. You don't want that, because now you're in an awkward position. Like, it doesn't really reflect well upon you. Now you look like the asshole, when that's not really what happened. This wasn't the place for you. These weren't your people. And your people exist and they're out there, but that wasn't them today. And I think that it would be nice if there was more of a focus on actual exclusivity. Like, it's cool to be exclusive, to be for a certain group and not for everybody. That's fine. You don't have to be for everybody. And I think everybody has this broad idea of like, oh, I just want everybody to like it. I want everybody to like me, and I want to be appealing to everyone. But the thing is, like, once you do that, you're taking away from yourself. Like, you don't even really need that. You can have 100 people who love what you do so much so that they'll support you. They'll show up at everything. They'll buy everything you ever put out. And maybe those 100 people are going to be the way that you survive. And that's perfect. That's good enough. You don't need 1 million. You really need like 100. And I think that thinking that way is way healthier even. Because like, I think that when you obsess over whether or not so-and-so felt this way, or you just end up caring so much about the wrong things, and you end up zeroing in on the wrong things. And I think that what you'll see is like people who, they can't be satisfied, because you're not going to please everybody. You're just not. Anything you ever do, people are going to have a problem with it. People are going to say there's something wrong with this. I even find that like what often happens is it's the people who know the least about something that have the most to say. And so you have to just kind of learn to ignore things. That's why you can't read comments, because or you can't take comments seriously, I should say, because most of the time that person that said that comment, they have no idea. They know nothing about you. They know nothing about the art form that you're participating in. They have no real experience in that. And even if they do, does their opinion really matter all that much? Now, like, there are levels to that. Like, say everybody's saying the exact same thing. Okay, maybe then you need to look in like a mirror. But most of the time, that's not what's happening. Most of the time, people are just judgmental and people think they know. Everybody thinks they know. And I think it's so like funny. It's like what I said to you before we started about like how you'll see comics who they'll say, you know, why don't I get booked? Why don't I get booked? I think often it's like the fact that you're even asking that type of question is probably part of the problem. Like, you are focusing on the wrong thing. Like, you've created these ideas of why you're not getting booked, and you think it's this and you think it's that. Just focus on being a comedian and being funny and going out there and working, because you will get booked if you do that. And you will get booked if you just follow that process and just work with people, do that collaboration thing, cooperate with people. That's the stuff that's going to get you booked. But if you sit here and you say that, oh, well, it's this person and it's this person, and why don't they give me opportunities, and oh, everything's gatekeeping, you are making your life so much harder. But it's because you've decided that. And I just think that it's natural to do so. It's actually more normal to assume that the world is against you. You just kind of have to accept that it's probably not. It's probably you, and that's okay, and that's fine, and just not take all that stuff so seriously, you know, because the world is whatever you want it to be at a certain point, you know. You can tell yourself all kinds of stories. So. Oh yeah, and I think as well, there's for me, because I've done a lot of different mediums, you know. I was a national champion competitive speaker and things like that, you know, so it's like from that to thru-hiking, film school, comedy, you know,
I feel like I've had the opportunity to like be in different mediums where it's like I've done things where I've been like, I'm balling, you know, and I've done things where I'm like, I'm just like, you know, I have side character energy in this activity, you know, and I think what's kind of valuable about that is like it teaches you, even though I think this sort of thing you have to constantly remind yourself of, and it's a lifelong work. And I mean, I think things in the realm of the ego take a lot of self-work and understanding and introspection. I don't think you snap your fingers and they're solved. And I don't even know that I've really believed that things related to the ego, as an example, are ever fully solved. But I'll say like what's been something I've tried to like meditate on a lot as I've gotten older is, like I've had things where I've like worked really hard for things and gotten exactly what I wanted and gotten exactly and been like, and then everyone decided I was the best.
Yeah.
I've had that happen.
Yeah.
And I've also had things where I've been like, man, I worked so hard and then like I did not get picked for the varsity team, you know, and that just is what it is. But I think it teaches you too that in the pursuit of those things, while the pursuit is, you know, definitely, you know, valid and that, you know, that's like Toni Morrison's quote, you know, I like to have written, you know, more than I like to write. I like to have written. It's like the work, you know, is its own reward in a way. But I do believe that I've learned a lot about how when you chase after, I like the practice of chasing after something or the work of chasing after something. But I've gotten the thing I've chased after enough times to know that once you get it, I mean, this sounds so trite, but it's so true. It's rarely as satisfying as you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Rarely as satisfying. And so I think that's been helpful because, you know, or also sometimes you'll get it, but then what you really have to pay attention to is how do you respond once you get it? Because some of those people, and you know, maybe I'm in this category too at times, but like some of those people are like, oh man, I want to be booked so bad. But then when you get booked, you go to the show and then you're not going to be happy with the turnout. Yeah. You're going to be like, there aren't even that many people here. And it's like, you were like crashing out about not getting this, but now you did get it. But then sometimes you'll get it and you'll get there and you won't even be happy, you know? And so that to me is always like the note beneath the note is I'm like, if I catch myself feeling that way, I'm like, dude, I got to get in touch here because it's like, you know, I feel like I'm a person where like, I love a brass ring. I love to reach for a brass ring, but okay, that's fine. But you really have to be in touch with yourself about like, what that means when you do and don't get it, because being in a space where you're putting so much expectation on, you know, XYZ achievement, but then also what, you know, sometimes it's like whether you do or don't get it, you're actually gonna be in your feelings about it. Yeah. And if that's the case, you know, that's human. I'm not like judging anybody for being that way. I'm that way too sometimes, but it's like that to me is like, okay, note to self, like we need to really think about what we're trying to achieve here, because it kind of seems like I would have found something to be less than satisfied about regardless of how this turned out,
right.
You know, and we can't,
that would have happened either way.
We can't just be on a perpetual motion machine of needing to be glazed all the time.
Yeah.
Like,
because, and I think like, it's that whole enjoying the journey thing, right? Accepting yourself where you're at and all that. Like, it's okay to be wherever you're at. It's okay to be at the position you're in, and you don't need this perfect thing. It's totally fine. Like, you know, it's gratifying enough to know that you're even trying. Like, I think that is okay, because that should be okay. You know, I mean, for me, there is nothing that I don't know if this resonates with you at all with writing or with writing jokes or like making a film, right? To me, it's finishing it that feels good. It's the fact that it's been done and I know that I've done it. And I think that there's something spiritually true about that. It's like the act of creation is the part that feels good. Not the results of the creation, not the outcome of the creation, but the actual creation itself. The fact that there was nothing and now there is something and it has come from me. And that feels good. And that's all I need to know. I need to know that I'm capable of that. And I need to remind myself that I'm capable of that, because it's easy to forget. You know, like, oh man, am I even capable of writing another good joke? Am I even capable of writing another good song? Maybe I lost it. It's been like 3 weeks and I haven't written anything. But then you write something and it's great. And it's like, oh, okay, so I still got it. And to me, that's all I need. I just need to remind myself, because once it's there, it's good. But there's also that thing where it's like, oh, I immediately want to share it. Like immediately I want to show it to the world. And if I put too much weight on that, then now I'm going to be disappointed, because if I share it to people and they don't immediately go, you know, oh my God, this is just the best, then I'm going to think, oh, what the fuck? Like I thought this was great and nobody's really responding to it. So don't even think about that. Just think about the fact that you created it and it's good. And that's all that you make it for you. Don't make it for other people, you know? And like, I think comedy can be harder with that, because comedy is so inherently reliant upon reactions. So if it doesn't respond the way you thought it was going to, it's actually painful. That's one reason I'm afraid to ever dive into that world.
Yeah. It's
I'm not ready for that pain.
Real-time feedback. That's another thing people talk a lot about, is the idea that you can tell in real time whether something is working or not.
Yep. Whereas I think other art forms, you have the grace of not having that.
Oh, and in film and in writing, the sort of pregnancy period of those art forms is extremely long, like years in many cases, right? Of course, maybe you show a draft to somebody or you work with an editor. You know, I'm not saying it's completely made in a vacuum, but I think that there are levels to how removed you are when the thing comes out. And I mean, comedy is pretty direct to helmet.
Yeah. And you can't ignore it. There's zero fooling yourself.
Sure, you're never like, that joke sucks, but man, this beat is really good. You know, you're just like, no, that's unless you're like Reggie Watts, or unless you're doing like some sort of like extra thing. But it's like, again, for like 90% of stand-ups, or again like people that we might see out tonight later at an open mic or something like that. It's like, no, we live and fall on that sword. In real time.
Yeah. How did you, because you've done all these different things, how did you wind up doing comedy? Like, you've always had an interest in it, I imagine?
Yeah, I have always had an interest in it. And I did do some things that were adjacent along the way. So I mean, one, that short film that I made when I was in Austin with Angelina Martin, like, she plays a stand-up comedian in it. And I was working at Fallout Theater, which is like a improv / stand-up theater there. And I got like free classes. So I took some free improv classes while I was there, right before COVID. So I was kind of comedy adjacent, and I'd already made, and that's kind of when I felt when I came here and I started comedy here, I was kind of like, okay, I have this weird like little calling card where it's like I made a short film with a comedian who's like somewhat established in Austin. So I was like, at least I kind of like, I dabbled, right? And I wrote the script for that. I kind of came up with the idea with somebody else, but I wrote the script. So it's like she did some ad-libbing of jokes on her own, which is actually a really fun part of the film. That one is out as well. But
and
like,
it's called
Dirty Laundry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yes, absolutely. And she does some stand-up in it in an empty laundromat. And she did those jokes herself, which was fun. But in sort of the nature of it, it's like a dark comedy. But so that was like one node. The other thing is, like I said, I did competitive speaking for 6 years. So I was on the speech team in high school and in college. And in college, they had an event called After Dinner Speaking. And I did it for like 3 years. And after dinner speaking, you would do a 10-minute speech. So already coming into Chicago comedy, I'd done several years of performing, and this is outside of any other theater or any, I'd done stuff like that, but I'm talking specifically like After Dinner Speaking basically was stand-up.
Oh, really?
And you're doing a 10-minute speech every time. It's the same speech that you're working on, each year, you would change it each year, but it's like you would work on the same thing, but you'd make adjustments. But my whole point being, it's like I was already used to performing in 10-minute chunks. Mm-hmm. So that really helped when it came to doing open mics, because it's like 4 minutes. I can do 4 minutes, that's, is it going to be good? That's a different story. But the time, and even the early, your early bookings in comedy, you're getting 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, So I had a lot of experience performing in that range of time, which I think was really helpful. That whole thing, you do like persuasion through humor. So it was a little more formal than stand-up, and obviously you're doing it in a classroom setting, so you're not getting heckled by like a drunk Cubs fan or something like that. So that's a little different, and that was a big adjustment.
That'd be weird. You're doing a regular speech and you got a heckler.
Oh yeah, and it's like one of your teachers or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think that helped a lot in the sense of just, I had that performance experience, but that was probably one of the bigger adjustments was going into open mics in Chicago. That the sort of most common setting and experience you're having is a bar mic, and also a bar show. So that was a little bit different. I'm not a bar person, so I did have to adjust to that. But I mean, having several years of basically doing stand up and also doing it in a longer format really, I think, helped, right off the bat. But before that, I mean, I would just say, like, my parents wanted me to be a child actor, and I was kind of a reluctant child actor. I would get, like, cast for things, and then I wouldn't want to do them. And so there was always kind of a push-pull there with me kind of, like, having qualities of an entertainer, but then just being, like, kind of shy and not understanding what was going on. I think that was the biggest issue, is I don't think I understood what was being asked of me. I think I would have been more comfortable, but that's, like, bound up in a lot of other things with my childhood, I think. So ultimately, I watched a lot of stand-up growing up, and I was always interested. And I mean, I lived here from 2016 to 2018. Then I lived in Austin for grad school 2018 to 2022, and then I moved back here in 2023.
Okay.
So I'd already, what's interesting is when I interact with some of the more veteran comedians here, I wasn't doing comedy during that 2016 to 2018 period, but I remember what Chicago was like then.
Yeah.
So I kind of have, like, I'm kind of grounded a little teeny bit in the kind of, like, certain places that existed with those folks, like, aren't around anymore. But the whole point just being, I remember looking online at open mics during that period.
And so you were thinking about it.
I absolutely was. Yeah. My biggest thing was that when I look back and I try to make sense of, like, why did I do or not do this, my biggest thing is, one, I mean, I was a lot younger. I was in, like, my mid-20s. So I was partying, I mean, I had a job, and I got promoted at my job multiple times, you know what I mean? Like, I was responsible, but I was also kind of screwing around in my free time a lot. Yeah. So there's that, but then also, okay, that's true for many people. That's not that exciting. My whole thing is from 2016 to 2018, when I lived here, I worked a night shift that whole time. I worked from 2 to 11 for 2.5 years while I lived here. So coming back here in 2023, it was like New Game Plus. I was like, oh, I know how to ride the L. I know some of these things. Like, I just went and performed at Second City the other day. I went to a show at Second City with my mom in 2016. Yeah. So it's like, and I hadn't been back there since. So it's like, I have the familiarity, but I'm like, I don't know. I think about that sometimes, because it would have been great if I'd started then. Although I do think I was accumulating a lot of life experience that's really relevant to me now. But I will say, sometimes I look back, I'm like, so what was I going to do? Was I only going to go to open mics on the weekends? Like, right. Could I have done that? I guess I think that for any normal, or whatever you want to call it, type of person, I would have needed, like, way more mental fortitude to be like, okay, so I'm only going to go out on Saturday and Sunday, and I'm somehow going to, like, take something productive from that. I mean, yeah, if you only went out for 2 days for 2.5 years, you would improve, you would learn things. But in a city as big as this, with a scene as big as this, you're kind of flotsam and jetsam. You're not really grounded if you're doing that. So I was around, and I was interested, but I think I was, like, too young, and I also didn't really have the right setup. And then I was thinking about it when I was in Austin. I was doing some things. I made a short film with a comedian, worked at a comedy club, took improv classes. But I was in grad school, and I was really busy with that, and I was trying to, like, make it worth my while and sort of work. I needed to be, like, doing film schmoozing and, like, getting to know those people so they'd work on my films and working on their films and stuff like that. So there was kind of always something in the way, I guess you'd say. And then the last detail I'll say is, so my mom lives in Indianapolis. And when I moved back from Austin, I moved back in with her for a little bit in Indianapolis, because it was a lot easier to move from Austin to Indy and then Indy to Chicago than it was to go from Austin to Chicago. That's kind of moving from one expensive city to another. Whereas, like, going back to Indianapolis for a second, I could, like, catch my breath, right? Yeah. So I was working in Indy during that time, kind of getting ready to move back here, because I'd lived here. I knew it was going to work for me. I knew with my vision, I could live here with like the transit and stuff. That was like fun living in Austin, but living in Austin when you can't drive a car, kind of hard.
Yeah.
The bus system, it's all better than Indianapolis. It's all right, but I was like, because I'd lived here, I knew this is where I need to be for the next step from a transportation perspective, which affects everything. It affects quality of life and your job and your social life and dating and all these things. So I was working in Indianapolis, and my mom was driving me to my job, which is, okay, that's fine. At least I had a job, right? But I wanted to be doing mics then too. Yeah. But I was like, you're already driving me to my job. I'm not going to make you drive to my hobby. So it just felt like too much. So that's my roundabout way of saying, like, yeah, I was always interested, and I would.
There's always a reason not to.
Yeah, and the guy I hiked the Appalachian Trail with, his trail name is Bison. Mine was Bookworm. He and I would take a lot of road trips related to our hiking, and, you know, we would drive to the Appalachian Trail on the East Coast a lot. And when we would do that, we would listen to a lot of stand-up on those drives. So, you know, my mom also worked, and my dad worked in cable television. So we also had like every channel. So I would be like listening or watching like HBO specials when I was really young and stuff like that. So, I mean, yeah, I think anybody that kind of grew up in that like late 90s, early 2000s, you know, Comedy Central's big, I feel like, for a lot of people in my generation. And definitely, but it's like I kind of had like an extra layer of resources or like study, because I also had like the pay-per-view networks where you could watch specials and stuff like that.
Back when specials were cool.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, it felt cool. Watching HBO when you're like 12, that feels pretty cool.
Yeah, they could swear on there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let alone, yeah. So, so I do feel like, you know, and that's a common story, but it is true in my case as well, which is just like a lot of exposure along the way. And now, I mean, I was showing you one of the stand-up books I'm reading earlier, but it's like now I'm really in that like next layer of like homework mode with it, where
you're trying to learn the actual craft behind it.
And go deeper too. You know, just like, I mean, I'm a huge music fan, and I mean, I feel like that's my relationship with anything, you know, whether it's video games, music, movies. Like if I get into it, I want to like really go deep and really like peel back the layers and, you know, find the influences and find quirky things that people don't know about, but that really epitomize the craft and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I am with comedy right now. I mean, I always had my own interests, and, you know, I don't know, are you familiar with Tom Lehrer at all?
No.
Tom Lehrer is this guy. He's famous. He died within the last year or so, but he was famous for this thing that he did. He released an album in like the 60s, I want to say. And it's all like comedic songs. He was kind of like a proto Weird Al type of guy. And the one that's most famous that, you know, your watchers or listeners may know is he did this one that is about the elements of, it's like, you know, cadmium, borium, da-da-da-da-da-da. And he did a song that's like used in a lot of like high school classes that's a parody of the periodic table. But he has other ones, right? And it's a great I mean, 2 Chainz sampled it, because he has a song called Poisoning Pigeons in the Park, and they sampled part of that in a 2 Chainz song like in the last 5 years. But anyway, so my grandfather wrote like a couple satirical novellas. He was like a history professor, but he would do some writing by the side. And he wrote a couple satirical novellas, and he was also a huge Tom Lehrer fan. So he passed that on to my mom. My mom passes that on to me. So it's like, when I say it was like kind of in the ether, it's like, yeah, I mean, you know, my grandpa was into like this weird sort of proto Weird Al satirical comedy album.
Yeah.
60 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, my family was always kind of interested in humor, I would say. So they basically like passed all that along to me, and then now I'm kind of trying to just work with what I was given, I would say. Yeah.
Comedy is I mean, I think it's interesting because you can enjoy it as an observer, and you can understand it even. You know what's happening. But I think that the more and more you learn about the craft of it, the more and more you realize how calculated all of these greats actually were, right? Like, you start to see the chess moves they're doing, and you start to understand, like, the misdirection that they're executing, and the fact that, oh, this joke works because of this and because of this, or even the opposite. You might know all the rules, but you still can't figure out why a certain joke works. And that is even more interesting. Like there's a certain mystique to some things that don't even really ever make sense. Sometimes something's just funny and it's hard to understand quite why it's funny. It just is funny. And so it's one of those things that really is like an endless puzzle. I wish that musicians thought of music more like comedy, truly, because I think that music's the same, or at least songwriting is the same, where there's no correct way to do it. There's no way. I couldn't teach you how to write a song. I could tell you how I write a song. I could tell you what I think is my method, but I could never tell you how you could write a song. And I think comedy's the same, where it's like you're going to have to develop your own unique way of making things funny if you want to stand out and be distinctive and unique. And that is really easier done than said. You have to just go and do it. I could tell you a million times what I think works, but you just have to do it, and you're going to figure out how it works for you. And, I think it's interesting how it like you said, you were always a fan, but now you're kind of getting into the behind the scenes of it, because you start to have to look at things differently when you do that. You start to think about things differently. And I think it's like that is it Shakespeare who said that? I think it was Picasso, when you learn the rules and then you break them.
Ah, yeah. Or I think Hemingway maybe also weighed in on that one
maybe.
too.
But it's a great quote, because it's like once you know the rules, then you're not supposed to follow the rules. Like a lot of the best comics don't do that. They break the rules all the time. But the rules are important still. You still have to know the fundamentals, but you can't really stray from the fundamentals until you truly understand them. Because if you're not following the rules, they're not coherent, they don't really make sense. And once you start to learn the rules, you can overthink them and then only follow the rules. And now you're kind of this staccato thing that doesn't know how to branch out and be different. And so it's just so interesting to me to see like how comedians blossom over the years and how they start to utilize the arsenal of comedy, because it is truly a craft. It's not so simple as just be funny. It isn't. I mean, yeah, of course you should just be funny, but that is just the very beginning. That's like the first step you take. It's like, it's why people would say, oh, I want to be a comedian, I can be a comedian. And it's like, okay, well then go try it then. Because it's you talking to me and being funny is entirely different than you monologuing on stage for 5 to 10 minutes and being funny. That's so different. And that's probably why your experience with public speaking is so beneficial, right? Is that you've already done that so many times that now you're just shifting the tone of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the tone needed to be shifted for sure, because it's a lot, again, these bar shows and things like that. Yeah, it is funny. I can tell that I am growing in like my kind of sort of analysis of what's going on, because it's like, for instance, when you were recounting that Mark Norman joke about the grape juice, my first thought instantly, like after you said that, was that's like, the strength of that is also how short it is, right?
Oh yeah,
yes. Like that goes like, you start to see things in that way where sometimes, I value a lot if I encounter a sort of analogy that I've not considered before. But sometimes it's also like, I can really, I know it when I see it, where I'm like, man, they got to the point of that really fast. It's simple, but that also makes it digestible, because it's like, that's what you see so much of, especially like in an open mic space, is like, people who are working through the idea and not in a place to edit, not in, what I mean? They're like, you're seeing like, the ugly parts of all this stuff sometimes, so that when you see something that's really been like well executed, like, it when you see it. And all of that is like, yeah, my joke senses do be tingling, more than they were for a long time, which, I find compelling. I also think, to your point, that there is one of the joys of comedy, and like when you were saying like sometimes something just like is funny, and we don't really, maybe we don't know why, or maybe there's not a simple answer for why. Mm-hmm. It makes you think about like, comedians who are more absurd, as an example. Sometimes I'll see a joke take like a really absurd twist that will be very funny and really have a lot of payoff. And it's like, yeah, if you were logically thinking through this, like on paper or something, you would probably not arrive at that idea or that punchline, or like, you wouldn't end up where that joke ends.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like being willing to kind of like go out on that limb, or just sometimes it's the persona of the person lends itself to that, can really help you understand like that there are, sometimes there are logical ways that a thing can play out. And then sometimes it's like the ability to break out of that is actually part of what gives it the juice that it needs ultimately. And I personally am a big fan. I think in my comedy, journey as a fan, was always interested in like alt comedy and stuff like that. And even now, again, part of the value for me in doing a lot of different kinds of rooms and trying to just see a lot of different types of performers is I enjoy going to, the altier spaces here in Chicago, because sometimes, what you'll see of like how they'll arrive at a joke or something humorous, or, you see people who are really willing to like break out of the comfort zone in pursuit of the laugh, and that to me is very instructive, because, it's just, I can enjoy like, some good old fashioned stand up, but when you get into the space of people who just have, whether it's a unique pace or energy or character or props, or there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I think the kind of interconnected nature of Chicago's comedy scene, including things like improv and sketch and things of that nature. There's a lot of great musical comedians in Chicago too. You sort of realize that like, there's not just one way a set can play out. And then also if you're doing like a little bit of producing and things like that. I produced a show for the first time last month, and built the lineup myself, hosted it myself. You start to realize too, like, oh, now I'm like a DJ. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, well, if I put this song before this song and then this performer before this performer, it's like then we're not even just talking about individual performances at an open mic based on how people signed up on the list. We're talking about really curating an event that will hopefully be positive and memorable to the audience, and then you're going like, oh man, like this energy is going to bring it down a little bit, but then this person's going to send it right back up, or like what we need at this moment is we need somebody with a ukulele, you know what I mean? And once you can start to think that way, like I find that to be very provocative as well. And some of the more established shows that have a lot of alt comedians in Chicago. I'm thinking of like Crushes as an example. I'm thinking about like Rad, a fun show, stuff like that Evelyn Troutman's involved in. Like, a lot of those, it's like, it's really dynamic, and that is very compelling, I find. And so it's like, as much as I can, I try to go and see that type of stuff and bring a little bit of that back. And, we're going into a new year. So it's like, that's, being able to like be a little more boundary pushing in terms of like style of performance and things like that. That's absolutely something that's on my mind for 2026, because to bring it back to something you said quite a while ago, there is that notion of like, when you're talking about things being memorable, and I'm thinking as well, like the roast battle diss thing that you did, very memorable. I'm sure everybody that saw that, that was on their mind that night, because that was so different. Someone who's watched a lot of roast battle, I was like, this is really different. But it comes back to, that notion again, it's like kind of a cliche, but true in a good way, I think, which is like, that people remember more. People don't remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. Right. And I think a lot of the best alt comedy kind of, it is more in touch with the feeling than it is just the material, because great material is great. But also like, I think even the best comedians, they're thinking about like how to make it presentationally engaging, because, that's what we need to do. If you're seeing person after person on a lineup, or if you're at an open mic and the list is 30 or 40 people deep, what are you going to do to really cut through in an environment like that and make sure that people are hearing ideally the stuff that you put effort into thinking up or writing down, or at least or how they're going to respond to the energy you're bringing in the moment.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised how much more important that is than material. Yeah. You'd think the material is the number one thing. But often people don't walk away from a show saying, oh, I loved that joke. that, and they describe the joke perfectly. Usually if someone tries to tell your joke back to you, they end up fucking it up. They don't even remember exactly what you said, because it's not quite... That's just not even how the memory works.
Yeah,
the memory is a feeling.
And if I can do that, I know it's a really good joke. And I've actually tried to be improving as an audience member recently, of being able to like really like tune in, and when something is grabbing me, I try to like lock in my brain like what are the things about it, because sometimes, you know, and I had this experience recently where I went and I watched a show at the Lincoln Lodge, and I, you know, there was one of the performers on the lineup had this joke I really like. I mean, in general, I really liked the set, but there was like this one joke I really liked, and I saw them afterwards, and we just happened to interact for a moment, and I was like, you know, I really liked this joke. I was like, I had seen this other joke of yours before, and I really liked it, but I really like this joke. And the person goes, wow, it means a lot to me that you say that. They go, that one's my favorite too. And so, you know, there's sort of like, I try to be the sort of person who, like, you know, if I'm, you know, I'm like, I like this track on the album. You know what I mean? It's not just like a general comment, but also, I've tried to get more in touch with that, because I know the feeling. I mean, there have been times when I've watched a whole show and then afterwards I do remember who I liked. I remember who I thought killed. I remember who I thought was maybe a little flat, you know. But then it's like, if you ask me to be like, what exactly did they talk about? Sometimes it's that's the nature of live performance. It's blazing by you constantly. You know what I mean? And if you look away for a moment and you look back, now it's changed and it's something different. You know, I work doing social media and sometimes co-hosting for the Trigger Warning open mic, which is a long running, it's a legacy Chicago mic that, you know, has based on its name, you can probably gather, has a strong reputation, but it's a part of Chicago comedy. And I do, you know, part of what I first started doing was like, I would do their Instagram stories, right? You go to certain open mics and everybody will do like, we'll get a story that is like, you know, just like a little documentation of what happened, and it's fun for the performers. They get to kind of show off the fact that they went out, you know, it's like I was here or whatever. So I do those, you know, and there's a lot of different ways that people do those. Some people will write in little comments to the jokes, or some people, you know, what my thing was, I would always do like GIFs. I would always do GIFs that like kind of riffed on something that happened in it. And, you know, with Trigger Warning's like 25, 30 people every Monday, right? And trying to do one of those for every single person, it made me become a better listener, because I'm like, I need to be like, okay, you mentioned Beauty and the Beast. Like, let's see what GIFs Instagram has for Beauty and the Beast, you know? Yeah. And sometimes it'd be like, you know, it could be really challenging to be like locked in. Now, granted, those are not long sets, so there's not a lot. And sometimes somebody would get up there and they're like new, or they don't, you know, they're like, they don't have it all figured out. And they might only do like a minute or two. And then I'm like, well, what did I have? Like, what did you say that I can really grasp onto here? But yeah, it's totally to your point. Like, I've had to become, and I've wanted to become and tried to become like a better listener, because, you know, again, it's like we're seeing these live performances, they just fly right by you. If you don't make the effort to engage and try to understand what's going on, I mean, you'll blink and you'll miss it, and then it's on to the next person.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think more input makes a better output too. Like allowing yourself to get that input and being open, like being a receiver, allows your output to be so much better, because you stop regurgitating the same things as much. You know, you are bringing in more ideas that just aren't your own, because you are opening yourself up to new ideas by doing that. You know, and one thing you said about condensation, I have another one of those joke or comedy books that I found in one of these free book things in my neighborhood. It's Freud on the jokes in the unconscious, like comedy in the unconscious. It's the only aesthetic book he ever wrote, which is interesting. So like, he didn't write anything about film, he didn't write anything about music, nothing like that. But he did write about comedy. And this is like the 1900s. This is before like stand-up comedy was even a thing yet. So really, he's just talking about like parlor jokes and stuff like this. Yeah. And one of the things he said is like part of like what makes something a joke in his mind is the idea of condensation, right? So it is reducing an idea to its smallest form is part of what makes something funny. And I think that's really interesting. Or even not saying it, right? Even like the Mark Norman joke. What's funny about it is the implication. He's not even telling you the conclusion. It's the fact that you figure it out yourself and you connect the dots yourself is what makes it funny. And I think a lot of jokes are that. It's like, trying to boil this down to the smallest possible form and make it make sense still, because that's the most powerful. Rather than over-explaining and making everything complicated, you keep it simple, and that makes it more universal in a sense. And what you said about alt comedy too is it's interesting, because I think, like, you know, the peak of alt comedy is Kaufman, right? He's like the one who paved the way for everybody. And I think a lot of the time what you'll see with alt comedy is you'll see people who sort of misunderstand Kaufman. Like, they think of Kaufman as this subversive figure who just didn't play to an audience and did everything he wasn't supposed to do, but not quite. Like, Kaufman is more like a professional wrestling character. And he even embraced professional wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his whole thing was like fighting girls and all this. There's a certain showmanship to what he was doing. And it was ahead of its time, where it's like, you are being subversive, but only as subversive as is appropriate, I suppose. And there's a reason that works. Like, you can't just fight the audience. You can't just make everybody hate you, because that's not really what he was doing either. There's a certain line you must walk that even goes beyond comedy in a sense. Like, you're more of an entertainer than a comedian at a certain point if you're pulling off alt comedy, in my opinion. You're kind of doing something more than comedy, and you are just integrating comedy within it. And that, a lot of pure comedians don't like seeing that, because they think of it as purely the craft, purely joke writing, and so they see that and, oh, that's gimmicky. But not quite. Like, there's a certain level you must walk, a certain line you must walk to really make that work. It's not easy, because Kaufman made it look easy, and people think they can be him. And so I love alt comedy. I think the weirder the better. That's my shit. But I see it done wrong so much.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard to pull off. And that's what makes it so good, is that it's so hard to pull off. And I think, like, with the roast battle thing, you could say that's alt comedy. You could say it's like musical comedy.
Sure.
I don't think of it as that. I think of it as I don't even think of it as comedy as I'm doing it. I think of it as like, it's just a rap.
Right.
But it works as comedy because of what it is. Like, it's punchlines and it's all this, but really what I'm trying to do is just write the best thing I could possibly write.
Yeah.
Or just freestyle the best thing I could possibly freestyle. And in that, it's funny. And that, I think, is what makes it work. Because if I lean too much into that and try to be funny and try to do all that stuff, now I'm not so much just trying to make it as good as it can be. I'm trying to entertain. And the entertainment kind of comes through entertaining myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, setting a standard for myself and then trying to meet that standard and just hoping people catch me along the way. And I think, like, it's almost like you don't play to the audience. You don't think too much about what they're thinking. And you don't do all that. You just kind of let them tag along for the ride. And then they're going to feel it if they feel it.
I think so, yeah. I had an experience like this that I think about a lot, because I did some acting when I was younger, and I was in a performance of Much Ado About Nothing. And
like Seinfeld.
Yeah, there you go. And I played Dogberry, who in that play is a police officer. He's like a constable. And there's a part where he kind of accomplishes his mission, and he's given a coin for his work, right? And I did like a couple nights of this play when I was in high school, and the first night when the person gave me the coin, I was like inspecting it, and that's, I think, what it says to do maybe in the script, is like to inspect the coin or whatever. I was like looking at the coin, and then I like put it in my mouth and I like bit it to like check if it was real, right? And it got a huge response, right? And it was interesting because then for the next 2 nights that we did the play or whatever, I did that again. And, you know, to me, this is a high school production of a William Shakespeare play. I'm mostly just trying to make sure that I am saying something that sounds like the lines. We don't need to put too much pressure on it. But a guy, a father of one of the other performers, came and talked to me like the second or third night. And he was like, this is so weird. He was like, did you notice that it didn't like get as big a response this time? And I'm like, you know, like 16, I'm 17 or something. So I'm like, yeah, I guess, I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, that's because like it was clearer that you knew to do it, you know, whereas like the first night it was
spontaneous.
Yes, which to be honest, I think is kind of a diabolical thing to tell a teenager. Like, you know, I'm like, can we leave this to the director, buddy? You know, like what, you know, unfulfilled dream are you trying to achieve right now? I am a 17-year-old playing Dogberry in Indiana.
Yeah, the man that told you that was Kubrick.
Yeah, that's how it felt for sure. But you know, that's also one of those things that you look back on later and you're like, he probably was right. You know, and he's right in the greater note of acting and performance, which is that, you know, you can pre-plan something and sometimes that can go really well. You know, I don't riff the most by any means, but I've gotten to the point where I can watch like a show or a mic beforehand. I can have my notepad. Things will come to me. I'll write them down. Sometimes I'll write a lot of them. And then because I have that speech background, I'll get up and I'll be able to do most, if not all of them. So that's a thing that I've kind of been like working on and feel pretty good about is like, I can come up with a bunch of riffs shortly before I go up and then I can execute most, if not all of them. That is like a thing. When I write a bunch and I try a bunch and I actually remember to do them all, I feel good about that because I'm like, that's almost like, yeah, ideally it's quality, but there's some quantity work happening here to be able to like put so much in. But I also, again, like I think I was talking much earlier on about this this joke where I was like, you know, contain your surprise, and this person had already not contained her surprise, and I was able to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
To me, those are also two different things. Like kind of cooking something up right before and being like, oh, this will land nicely can be very satisfying, and I do like doing it. But also like when you kind of get that thing in the moment and it's truly off the dome, those are two different things. And it's also like, that is very satisfying in its own right, you know, because that is something that we all know is just happening in that moment.
Even subconsciously, like maybe we don't know it, but our brain knows. Yeah, we feel it.
And that to me, like that's definitely something that I have been paying a lot of attention to with performers that I look up to, is sort of their ability to acknowledge and roll with what's going on, and that as like a tool that, again, like sometimes I think that tool gets laughs. I think probably in its heightened version it's also really freaking funny, but sometimes I think it's also just kind of like conditioning the audience to say like, hey, I'm here just like you guys, right? And I do think, you know, to your point, like that they respond to that. I think it builds trust.
Yeah.
You know, it builds trust or a relationship, or at least an acknowledgement of the live nature of what we're doing that is quite unique, you know, and I see the value there. And again, like sometimes I think the value of that exists in punchlines. Sometimes I think the value in that exists just in like curating the vibe and like, you know, building the energy with those people to be like, hey, I'm here with you guys. Like, this isn't canned, you know, like maybe some parts of this are written, but, you know, I'm here with you guys and we're having a good time.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of value to that. And it's something that I've really been like studying and has kind of been on my mind in recent months.
Yeah. Like to me, I think like the comics that always stick out to me the most are the ones that, even if it's not spontaneous, it feels spontaneous. And I think part of that might just be not being so, like maybe not having a script, but maybe having bullet points.
Yeah.
Like not so I have to say this line, then this line, then this line, but really it's like you have a skeleton of a set, and then we're just moving around the skeleton and kind of getting from here to here to here to here, because there's something that feels more natural about that, and there's something looser about that, and I think that it allows the personality to shine through more when you do that too. Like whatever it is that you're bringing to the function, it has a chance to breathe, and it has a chance to express itself in a way that it couldn't if you were just reading off of a script, you know. And you're gonna catch a moment that you wouldn't catch otherwise because you weren't so worried about, oh, we got a tight 5 and I have to say all this stuff, you know. And you know, all that being said, it's all stylistic. There's going to be that guy that breaks, that doesn't follow anything we're saying, and he does amazing. Like, he does stick to his script, and that's exactly how he does it, and it always works. That person exists too. But I think, like, for me at least, what jives with me, it's always the person that I feel like is just, they're like talking to me like they would talk to me if we were just sitting together, as opposed to like going on stage and presenting. It's a different feeling. And like I said before, it's, even if you don't know, you feel it. You feel the difference. Even if you can't put a finger on it, there's something that feels more authentic about that person that's not so guided. And it's kind of true to life, in my opinion. Like, it goes back to the very beginning of this conversation. Like, what are you going to bring to an interview? Are you going to be so guided and so predictable that I am basically not allowing room for anything? Because what happens is now you've created an atmosphere where the other person cannot share and the other person can't open up. And if you can find a way to do both, and you have this direction, but also you don't have that direction, you have enough looseness to allow that person to move, then you're going to get something entirely different, And then you could even tie it back to the thing we're talking about with films. You could be the director that shows up with the perfect vision, who knows exactly how it's going to go, but you're not going to get that performance from that actor that you might want because they don't have the room to find the character. You got to give them enough room to do that too. And so I think like it's an eternal struggle of life, How much are you going to give and how much are you going to take? And how much are you going to put yourself into something and how much are you just going to watch and let it be? And yeah, maybe that's the moral of this episode. Maybe we found it. Maybe that's it.
I think, you put a pretty nice little button on it there. Yeah. I think there's a Michel Desserteau quotation, I want to say, that goes something along the lines of like, a destination is an idea.
Oh, whoa.
And I think I can definitely, vibe with that, where it's like, and especially doing like long distance backpacking and stuff like that. I mean, you pick this goal of this place you're trying to get to, but ultimately it's kind of arbitrary. You know what I mean? It's like, why did we need to walk from Georgia to Maine? Exactly. Why do we do that? But, it's enjoying the side quests and all the people you meet along the way. And I think just trying to enjoy that. But it's like, it is, totally to your point, like it's this big challenge that I find of like having the vision, but not being so set in the vision that you sacrifice everything else. Because I'm also, Buddhism as a religion can be very passive.
Yeah.
There's a lot, not always, but there is kind of like an undercurrent. And I think in my life, like I can be a very passive person. Like I can be really active, but I can also be extremely passive. And I'm a big, like, let me see how this is going to play out type of person. Especially when I have like many scenarios, like sometimes I'll be like, I think I know the answer to the question, but let me just see like what everybody else thinks. Or I think something bad is about to happen here, but let me just see what's going to go on. And I think there's a lot of value to that because it's like sometimes it's good that I just keep my mouth shut, you know what I mean? And I just am like, and I watched it play out. But then like the flip side is sometimes you need to be active and you need to, and especially if it's like your thing, like all these creative projects we're talking about, it's like, you got to put your stamp on it, because of all the time and energy it takes to do these things. And also because, that comes back to that notion of like, only you can make your stuff, you know what I mean? Only you can kind of bring it into existence. So it's a huge battle, but I think like I am also of the mindset that you need to try to be of both minds, and it's like, it's kind of knowing when to activate which part.
Yeah.
When is it best to just kind of sit in the pocket and let things play out, and when is it best to have a really tight hand on things and be involved and like get shit done.
Yeah. Well, the show ends with two things. One, a message for the children. All right, the kids. The show is obviously for kids, all right? We have very smart kids that watch this show. They're about 3 to 5 years old, and they're really intelligent. So what you're going to do is you're going to give them a message, a moral, an idea that they can carry into their life, and they can use something that's going to make their life better, stronger, more powerful, more Hulk-like. I don't know what it is, but it's an idea that's contained within your brain, and you're going to put it out into the universe, into the microphone, into the child's brain. And they're going to get off the bus, and they're going to use that idea, and they're going to accomplish amazing things. They are our future, these children. And second, the social medias, where people can find you, the places they can see your faces, where they can type to see you. You got to tell them because they've spent this much time with you, so they might as well spend some more. Sir, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, I've been this is a thought for the youth that has been emerging, and I've been telling audiences this a lot lately. So I feel like it's appropriate. I feel like it's appropriate for an audience of any age, but maybe mostly relevant to children as well. And I keep saying it, and so I'll say it again. Don't go to grad school. Don't go to grad school. You don't need to go to grad school. You don't.
I'm already on it.
Yeah, don't. No, I mean, for so many reasons. By the way, I went to grad school. But yeah, I mean, try to have as few financial burdens and responsibilities to the state as possible.
Yeah,
is a big one. So hey, I mean, if somebody's footing the bill, then disregard this advice completely, potentially. But I think that. I mean, I'm thankful for my grad school education, UT Austin. But I think that, in this day and age, again, with all these speedrunners, man, grad school, it takes years, you know what I mean? And unless you're in like a field that's like really totally specific, but it's just like, it takes years and it's like all that time. I mean, I'm so thankful for the people that I met. I mean, I learned some crazy stuff. I don't think frankly, I wouldn't be as funny if I didn't do it, I'm sure. So it's like, all of these are reasons to not listen to me, which you also can choose to do. But, I just think about like, I guess I can't say for sure how things would have worked out, and I'm happy with my plan, but also, if I think in a lot of ways, like, it was like a detour, and I'm not necessarily sure that I needed that detour. I think I could have arrived. I wouldn't have all the things that I have now if I hadn't done it, but I also am not sure that I needed that detour. And sometimes I think in a lot of cases for a lot of people, the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
So just a little something. Maybe I didn't need to give a whole. Maybe I could have just left it at don't go to grad school. But
well, I think it's good to have like a nuanced take on that because there is good and bad in it, right? And I think that in the day and age we live in now, odds are most of that information you're going to get there you can find online
or through experience.
What that place is going to do for you, in my mind, is two things. It's going to give you the friends and the connections you might want in the industry you want to work in, and it's going to streamline all that information for you in a way that's going to be digestible. But those two things also can take place outside of there. Yeah. So, maybe if you don't want to be in a debt that's never going to be removed even through death, then maybe don't go to grad school.
Just a thought. Just a thought. Yeah. And I guess the only other thing I'll say on that is just that I did get those things that you just described. So I try to give like a balanced take where it's like, actually, because UT's a pretty solid school, like I did get those things. Yeah. But yeah, I just think of the time and the energy and like, I was living here, and granted I was working that night shift, but I had like a legit adult job, and I was so young. But I was like, in my mind, I was like, I need to go to grad school. So I I wanted to, and so I kind of took all the stability that I had built and kind of threw it to the wind while I did that. And then I came back, as like an evolved Pokemon, and that's cool. But I just think about that sometimes, and I'm like, man, I was here. I had a whole structure here, and I had, and I sort of, in this day and age, being able to like put down roots and stuff like that, it's really hard. It's way harder to rent in Chicago in 2025 than it was in 2016. Yeah. It is, because I've done both. And so I just think about that, and I'm like, all I'm saying is, youth of the world, if you're gonna shake up the foundation of your life, make sure it's worth it. That's all I'm saying. Now, to find me on social media, I'm around. My Instagram, it's at hiking bookworm. I don't know if it'll be that forever, honestly. It has been for a really long time. But yeah, bookworm was my trail name. Hiking bookworm. Initially when I was on there, I was doing a lot of like hiking content, and I produced a podcast about hiking the Continental Divide Trail called Camp Walk Along. I'm attached to a bunch of different stuff. If you go to Hiking Bookworm, you can see all the various side projects I have and stuff like that. I'm part of an art collective, SalmonHouse Art Collective, where I work with a graphic designer and comic book artist, as well as a musician, and we all kind of work on each other's projects, and these guys worked on all my films and stuff like that. So, I'm attached to a lot of different things. If you want to find me in person, I'm at Trigger Warning Open Mic at Output Wrigleyville every Monday. The list goes out at 9. It starts between 10:30 and 11. Honestly, I always feel like this is such a bold claim, but I mean, it is. It's one of the craziest open mics in Chicago. It's one of the craziest open mics, one of the most hype. It's a legacy open mic. It's been around for like 10 years plus. It's a wild time, and it's, whether it's your flavor or not, it's worth experiencing. And we're going through a fun time right now where like the mic is kind of booming at the moment. So I would love just to see more different people come through and just help make the experience of the room. So you can find me online, but you can find me in person too. Come through Trigger Warning Open Mic, please.
Please. Pretty please. He's begging you. And yeah, all right. Well, it's been beautiful. It's been an amazing time here with this hiking bookworm. Yeah, I think hiking bookworm's a good name, by the way. I think you should keep it.
Okay, well, it's not. It hasn't been changed thus far.
There's something about it I think is unique.
Yeah.
And then
sometimes I'm like, it's not my name.
Once you like add the lore to it, it makes it even more exciting. Like you literally are a hiking bookworm.
Yeah, because I do get a lot of feedback from people that's like, oh, that's why that's what it is. But when I first started, I know we're wrapping up here, but when I first started doing comedy, a lot of my material, the two main things my material was about, and this is still kind of true, but it's like my vision. Right? Because that's my whole life. I've seen things differently than everybody else. And hiking the Appalachian Trail. Because you say that and instantly people are like, okay, that's crazy. You slept outside for 7 months. Yeah. That's crazy. It is crazy. And so a lot of my early jokes were about like trail experiences. And it's funny because one of the things I found is that like translating those experiences to an audience is kind of difficult, right? Getting them to understand like this weird kind of like it's like a modern day hippie kind of thing, you know, and there's like camping festivals and, whatever. And so it was like hard to get people to understand it. So, I still do that material, but it's funny because when I started, I was like, oh, I'm going to talk about hiking all the time. And now it's like I have a handful of jokes that I feel like are good about hiking, and I'm very selective about when I do them. So hopefully in 2026, we're going to bust out more of the crazy stories. But to your point, like, yeah, I'm a hiking bookworm.
Yeah. And it's unique, man. It's unique. Most people can't say that. So you got to hold on to that stuff, as long as you can. As long as you can. And with that being said, folks, thank you so much for being here.
Wrapping up the interview.
Huge episode. Huge. Here on Radio. Clocking out. Double down, competition couldn't help him to rock. Missed the whole time, holy fell through the flock. That's an ordinary miracle, wealth to the block. It's a balance in the character that's calm and collect. It's apparent his caricature is lost in the